Chapter 252. At this time, the Empress looked at the sky. It was still gloomy, which made people very uneasy. "Your Majesty, I feel uneasy." The Emperor patted her hand and comforted her. "It's okay. I've asked the Imperial Astronomer. Today is indeed a rare auspicious day. It can be said that it's a once-in-a-100 years opportunity, otherwise I wouldn't have let Mother arrange it." Not far away, the Empress Dowager sat there with a sneer. Her eyes were staring at the heavens-seeking platform in the middle of the field, as if she was looking forward to a good show. Gong Yimo had been resting with her eyes closed. She felt that there would be a good show waiting for her today, but she couldn't figure out what the problem was. At this time, the Guard of Honor had reached the end of the main road. Everything was going smoothly, and the people were in high spirits. It wouldn't be long before the Guard of Honor reached the heavens-seeking platform. Hopefully, things would go smoothly. But at this time, suddenly, there was a sudden clap of thunder. The sky that was originally gloomy suddenly changed. The light seemed to recede, and the sky became even darker. Evil wind surge. The sudden gust of wind blew the sand into the people's eyes. The procession stopped moving. They held the things in their hands tightly. There couldn't be any trouble at this time. The noise became louder and louder. Even the people felt that the weather was strange. At this time, there was a sudden clap of thunder, and the sound seemed to be ringing in their ears. Many people screamed, especially the women. Most of the people were a little uneasy. It was rare to see such a phenomenon, let alone on a day like today. The screams continued. The people who were guarding the two sides of the street retreated. Some people even shouted, "A phenomenon from the heavens, destroy my Rong Chang." This voice was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, causing millions of ripples. Hua. Seeing that the people were uneasy and that someone was spreading rumors, the guards on both sides of the road unsheathed their sword. They had been warned by Gong Dai. If anyone dared to cause trouble on such a day, there was only one outcome: death. A phenomenon from the heavens, destroy my Rong Chang. A phenomenon from the heavens, destroy my Rong Chang. At the end of the road, a grey-robed man with a crazed expression suddenly walked out. His mouth was saying outrageous words, and his footsteps were disorderly as he walked straight towards the golden sedan. Some commoners hid at the side and looked over curiously. They thought to themselves that this person really wasn't afraid of death. Didn't he see that there were so many guards there? Where did you come from? How dare you spread rumors and create trouble here? The vassal at the front roared. Without hesitation, he ordered, "Imperial guards, listen to my order. Take him down quickly." In an instant, 10 Imperial Army soldiers clad in silver armor leaped out from the Imperial Army and pointed their blades at the newcomers. Their auras were astonishing, and it was obvious that they were elites specially groomed by Gong Dai. "Monster! It just so happens that the Avilders are wreaking havoc in the world, and lightning strikes from the heavens to warn the world." His voice was very loud and traveled very far. At such a time when everyone was in a state of panic, it really made the hearts of the uneasy commoners thump heavily. Was the princess a demon? Was that why God gave her a warning on the day she was reinstated? "Take him down." The vassal frowned and quickly retreated after giving the order. The Imperial Army elites had already brandished their blades and engaged in a battle with the crazed man. But what was surprising was that the man's martial arts skills were extremely high. A rusty sword was being brandished by him in a casual manner, leaving no gaps for the wind to pass through. When Gong Yimo heard the commotion, she couldn't sit still. But she was stopped by the vassal who had noticed it earlier. "Princess, on such a day like today, you can't come out until you reach heaven-seeking platform. Otherwise, those people will use the excuse of not following the ancestral teachings to make things difficult for you." The vassal continued, "Don't worry, the prince has countless elites under his command. He alone is no match for them." But he had underestimated the opponent's power. Under the attack of the man in grey, the Imperial Army gradually lost. Under the flashes of the blades, they fell to the ground one by one, lifeless. The vassal was a little anxious and hurriedly signaled the rest of the Imperial Army to move. When had the commoners ever seen such a cold massacre? The suppressed exclamations grew louder, and the people were even more anxious. At the same time, the heavens didn't let them off. The deep rumbling of thunder was incessant. In addition, the Imperial army that surged forward later fell to the ground one by one. Captain Gong was in an uproar, and his own people were beginning to feel uneasy. What kind of person was this? How dare he come alone to create trouble? The Imperial army quickly moved to the middle, blocking Captain Gong with their bodies, and protecting him from behind. If anything happened to the princess on such a day, they wouldn't be able to answer to the prince. The return of the Avildor will bring chaos to the country. Don't help the Avildor. After finishing off the last Imperial army that rushed forward, the crazy man pointed at Captain Gong with his sword and shouted as if he was persuading the people. At this moment, his clothes were as old as before, without a single bloodstain. He was forcing Gong Yimo to make a move. Gong Yimo's heart skipped a beat. First, it was the Empress Dowager who drugged her food. Then, she picked such a day where no one could see the mistake and found a peerless master to kill her. If she didn't accept the challenge, with this man's martial arts, even if she took him down in the end, many of Gong Dai's people would be injured or killed. At that time, blood would flow like a river, and it would be a disaster. But if she accepted the challenge, according to the rules of the ancestors, she could only appear at the heavens-seeking platform. If she came out now, she would leave behind something that those old antiques could use against her. Secondly, with so many layers of clothes, even if she wasn't poisoned, how could she fight? The other party's martial arts seemed to be on par with hers. In a dilemma, Gong Yimo suddenly smiled. There was a master behind the Empress Dowager. The Imperial army felt a chill in their hearts. They knew that they couldn't let Gong Yimo make a move today. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to answer to the prince. So, only they could do it. But just as the two sides were about to clash again and were about to win with numbers, the golden curtain fluttered slightly, revealing the figure of a half-reclined woman. Her voice was as pleasant as a breeze. It sounded like a question or a sigh, like joy or sorrow, but it rang clearly in everyone's ears. "I'm the Avildor." The man in grey was stunned, then laughed at the golden carriage. "If it's not you, who is it? And who are you?" The other party sneered. "Someone who's about to die doesn't deserve to ask." Gong Yimo was amused. "Then are you here to fight with me?" "Princess, you can't." Before the man could speak, the leader said nervously, "Today is an auspicious day. You can't show yourself until you arrive at the heavens-seeking platform." The man in grey laughed again, even raising his eyebrows in disdain, and swinging the rusted sword in his hand. "Auspicious day? I think it's the death anniversary." His words silenced the golden carriage. He thought that he had scared the other party and was very proud. But the people beside the carriage heard a rustling sound from inside the carriage, as if the princess was tired of lying down and changed her position unhurriedly. "Do you know?" There was a trace of mockery in the lazy voice as she snorted coldly. "Those who wanted to kill me all died in the end." Chapter 253. The people waiting at the heavens-seeking platform gradually felt that something was wrong. Seeing that the sacrificial song and dance were about to end, it was time for the emperor to go up the stage and ask the heavens and announce to the world. The emperor felt a little strange. Logically speaking, the guards of honor should have arrived by now. He was about to call someone to take a look, but the MC was already singing loudly, "Welcome your majesty to the heavens-seeking platform." When the people heard this, they all knelt down. The heavens-seeking platform was very complicated, but the main purpose was actually very simple. It was to ask the heavens whether it was appropriate for him to confer Gong Yimo the title of Feng Gui Rongji Princess. As long as there was no bad omen, it was considered over. And the heavens would not really give any warning, so this segment was just a formality. But at this moment, the emperor felt a little uneasy because the sky had just started to sink, and there was also the sound of thunder. Because the wind direction was not facing the heavens-seeking platform, there was not a trace of wind in this semicircular staircase. The only thing that could be seen was that the weather had turned gloomy. It was clearly not noon, but it was as dark as evening. When Emperor Gongcheng went up the stage, he subconsciously glanced at the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager looked at the sky and seemed to be very surprised, but the reason for her surprise was different from his. She was surprised that today's weather was really as predicted by that person. With so many people watching, Emperor Gongcheng could not delay any longer. Step by step, he walked up the heaven-seeking platform. First, he pardoned the hundreds of officials, the officials' family members, and the common people. Then, he looked at the countless people below and as usual, he first recited a sacrificial speech. There were many ceremonies in this segment, so it took a long time. Therefore, Emperor Gongcheng only hoped that Gong Yimo could arrive in time before he finished all of this. No matter what happened, the auspicious time could not be missed. Because once it was missed, it would be troublesome to wait for the next day. Those people would say that the heavens did not recognize Gong Yimo, so they deliberately did not let her go up the heavens-seeking platform to refuse to hold it again. Even if she was restored in the end, she could not be Feng Gui Rongji Princess. It could only be another title, not to mention the same position as the Crown Prince. So, Moa, you must be faster. At this time, Gong Dai and the other princes and princesses were standing at the bottom of the heavens-seeking platform, but they did not see the figures of the honor guard for a long time. Gong Dai was a little anxious, and he gave Bai Sheng a look in the crowd. Bai Sheng accepted the order and quickly left. On the other side, Gong Yimo's arrogance made the grey-robed man very angry. He had painstakingly practiced martial arts for more than 40 years. It was the first time he had been ridiculed by a little girl like this. Before he came, he had heard from others that Gong Yimo's martial arts were not bad. However, in his heart, he felt that no matter how good she was only 17. How much real ability could she have? Gong Yimo did not care about the obstruction of the officials. With a flash of her sword, the golden silk curtain in front of her was cut in half by her sword. In the end, he still broke the taboo and stood in front of the world. Her casual and reserved temperament caused the grey-clothed man to become serious for a moment. Following that, Gong Yimo jumped down from the sedan and landed lightly on the ground. Her hand twirled with a sword flower. She was dressed in a luxurious brocade robe with a tall golden crown. She looked astonishingly beautiful, but also had a threatening aura. However, her clothes were still too cumbersome. Although she had taken off her outer robe and threw it into the sedan, her body was still wrapped in many layers, making it very inconvenient for her. But she couldn't take it off, because even if she didn't care, she had to be mindful of how the world looked at her. If she really wore a modified inner garment like she usually did at home, those pedantic people's spittle would drown her. When the grey-clothed man saw that Gong Yimo had finally come out, his first plan was considered to have succeeded. So his rigid face revealed a trace of a smile, which looked especially strange. He. Little princess, wearing this set of clothes must be very tiring, right? Do you want me to help you? His smile was evil, but there was no lust in his eyes. He only wanted to humiliate Gong Yimo. The moment Gong Yimo saw him, she knew who was behind this matter. She slowly tightened her grip on her sword. A fierce battle was unavoidable. Both of them were people with outstanding strength. If they fought with all their strength, those who were not of the same level would not be able to get close to them. When Bai Sheng saw this situation, he knew that things were bad and hurriedly ran back to the heavens-seeking platform. The heavens-seeking platform had already started the segment of the heavens-seeking platform. How could it be so fast? Bai Sheng was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. At this moment, the eunuch announced loudly, "The auspicious hour has arrived, heavens-seeking platform." Hearing this, everyone present knelt down again. The emperor held the heavens-seeking platform in his hands and asked hesitantly, "Today, the 21st year of the Jew calendar, on the winter day of the 12th month, Dai Yu State's third emperor, Emperor Gongcheng, is here to seek the heaven. I have a daughter, pure and intelligent, with outstanding wisdom. She has meritorious service to the Dai Yu State and the people. She has a broad mind and can take on heavy responsibilities. I hereby grant her the title of Crown Prince. Her title is Feng Gui Rongji." When he said this, it should be a coincidence. The sky suddenly flashed and a muffled sound of thunder was heard. It was as if the heavens had heard it and made a sound of displeasure. Emperor Gongcheng gritted his teeth and said the last sentence. "Seeking the heavens and earth, the people of the world, heavens-seeking platform." When the last few words were said, suddenly, A bolt of lightning lit up half the sky. The flashes of lightning seemed to be right in front of him. It caused many of the officials' family members to cry out in alarm. Before Emperor Gongcheng could say anything to remedy the situation, the sound of thunder shook the heavens and earth. Emperor Gongcheng's face sank as he looked at the sky seriously. At this moment, the Empress Dowager laughed proudly. "Emperor, have you received the heaven's edict?" When the officials heard this, their faces turned ugly. At this time, people more or less believed in such things. It was clearly an auspicious day, but the princess's coronation ceremony happened on this day. Moreover, the auspicious hour had arrived, but the princess's guards of honor had not arrived. Could this be the will of the heavens? The princess was an inauspicious person and could not be restored. Gong Yimo's side gradually fell into a bitter battle. When experts exchanged blows, there was a difference of a hair's breadth. However, she did not know who designed her clothes. Each layer only had one button, and it was very long. The material was also very heavy brocade, so she was fighting very strenuously. Moreover, the other party was very hateful. He deliberately cut her clothes as if he was teasing her. He wanted to humiliate her. Rip, the man in gray's rusty sword, cut open a section of her tail, revealing the vermilion robe below. Then, there was the sound of cloth tearing. He cut open the button of her outer robe with his sword. The clothes were torn open, making Gong Yimo very embarrassed. Fortunately, she dodged quickly. Otherwise, the sword just now was a little deeper and cut all the cloth in front of her chest, exposing her in front of the world. That would be the biggest joke in the world. The grey-robed man laughed when he saw her restrained appearance. "Are your clothes too cumbersome? Let me help you fix it." Chapter 254. At this time, Gong Cheng stood on the heaven-seeking platform and looked at the end of the street. He wanted to see Captain Gong's figure appear at the end, but there was no one. Where was Moa stopped? Seeing that the emperor did not give an order and still wanted to buy time for Gong Yimo, the Empress Dowager could not stand it anymore and said gloomily, "The auspicious time has arrived. If Gong Yimo still does not appear, it is equivalent to giving up the coronation ceremony. Does your majesty want so many people to wait for her here? Gong Yimo really has a lot of face." Hearing this, Gong Cheng looked at the sky. Ignoring the ugly expressions of the officials, he said slowly and firmly, "The auspicious time is too much. Moa may not be unable to make it. After all, these 2 hours were the auspicious time." He did not believe that even if Moa was entangled with something, 2 hours was enough for her to solve the problem. Hearing this, the Empress Dowager's face was as gloomy as the sky, mixed with thunder and lightning from time to time. "Even if I am willing to wait, Your Majesty, you have to consider the opinions of the officials, right? Even if you can put aside the political affairs for Gong Yimo, these officials have a lot of things in their hands. They are already giving Gong Yimo face by attending the ceremony. But Gong Yimo did not keep the appointment and so many people have to suffer because of her." Saying this, she pointed to the sky again. "Even if you don't listen to me, don't you understand the meaning of God? Gong Yimo is an inauspicious person, and her return will bring disaster to the country. So today is clearly an auspicious day, but because of her, God is angry and sent a vision. Emperor, you are so muddle-headed that you still favor this woman." Because the venue was semicircular, her voice reverberated throughout the hall. Many people could hear her. Some of the ministers, as the Empress Dowager had said, were worried about Gong Yimo's appearance because of the heavenly phenomenon. They hoped that she wouldn't appear. Rip, there were a few sounds of cloth tearing, and the brocade fluttered in the air. Accompanied by the deliberately obscene laughter of the man in grey, Gong Yimo looked like she was being molested in front of everyone. This made many people unable to stand it. The people who were hiding in the dark felt distressed and angry when they saw this scene, but there were also many old scholars who felt that it was unsightly and left angrily. Many imperial guards wanted to help, but Gong Yimo and the man in grey were too powerful. Even if they interfered, it would only be more of a hindrance. At this moment, there was a muffled sound. Gong Yimo's pure gold crown was sliced off by the grey-robed man's sword. It flew in an arc in the air and fell to the ground. She turned her body, and her hair was torn with the wind. Her clothes had become tattered and tattered, hanging on her body like rags. If it was any other woman, they would have been unable to endure such humiliation. Princess. The anxious voice of the vassal came from behind. They didn't care anymore. They couldn't let the princess continue fighting even if their blood flowed like a river. Who knew that just as they were about to move, Gong Yimo suddenly raised her hand and stopped them. The Empress, the Empress, the Empress's platforms, this palaces, this use, Yes Kang Rui. That's my name. There's no harm in telling you, because you're going to die in my hands. The strong wind blew Gong Yimo's clothes and her hair. Her face was pale and stern, and she suddenly laughed coldly. He placed his hand on the sleeve that had already been torn off, and pulled it fiercely. Rip, rip, rip. While everyone was still in shock, Gong Yimo tore off several layers of her clothes, revealing her black-collared and dark red skirt. Those layers of luxurious clothes were torn to pieces on the ground. Her slender waist was tied up, revealing her figure. The man in grey was shocked. He did not expect Gong Yimo to be so open. He tightened his grip on his sword and said angrily, "Looks like you, the princess, are really a slut. You dare to tear off your clothes in front of a stranger. Since that's the case, let me tear off your last layer of cloth. I'll let you enjoy the looks of all the men here." But he said this to make Gong Yimo angry. But how could Gong Yimo fall for such a despicable trick? Looking at the uneasy man in grey, she raised the hidden blade in her hand again. She pointed at him and said word by word, "I'll tear your body apart like a rag on the ground." As she said that, the two of them started fighting again. This time, without the layers of comfort, Gong Yimo was much more relaxed. She actually had the upper hand. Earlier, she was unwilling to take off her clothes because she still cared about how the world looked at her. But now, she had let it go. Instead of letting the other party tear it apart, she would rather destroy it herself. She could tell that this person's martial arts did not surpass hers. He was just deliberately stalling for time. Those people did not want her to appear. She had to appear no matter what. Time passed by slowly. The people at the heavens-seeking platform gradually became restless. The auspicious hour was almost over. Was Gong Yimo going to come or not? At this time, after the ministers discussed, someone spoke. "Your Majesty, Gong Yimo delayed the auspicious hour and is an unknown person. The heavens will not tolerate it. Therefore, the heavens sent a strange sign and the weather change. Therefore, we beseech your Majesty to follow the will of the heavens and cancel this ceremony, to avoid the wrath of the heavens and disaster." Following that, many ministers followed suit and shouted, "The heavens are strange. Your Majesty, please cancel the conferment and follow the will of the heavens." At this time, when more people heard that the heavens were dissatisfied with Gong Yimo, they knelt down in fear and their voices shook the heavens and earth. "Your Majesty, please cancel the conferment and follow the will of the heavens." Emperor Cheng, who was standing on the high platform, could not help but take a few steps back. He looked at the crowd and then looked at the end of the street again. There was still no figure. At this moment, he really felt disheartened. He really felt that this was the will of the heavens. At this time, a cold voice suddenly sounded. "The heavens are strange. Is it because of royal sister?" "I don't think so." Bai Sheng ran over from somewhere. He was panting as he carried a large pile of documents in his arms and followed behind Gong Dai. Gong Dai walked up to the heavens-seeking platform step by step. His intervention made everyone's voices lower. They did not forget how terrifying Gong Dai was. They did not want to open their mouths at this time and let him bear a grudge. Anyway, the truth was the truth. They did not believe that Gong Dai would be able to say anything. Gong Dai took the last step on the platform and bowed to the emperor. "Imperial Father, please be clear. On such an auspicious day, the heavens sent a strange sign. There is indeed a ghost. But whether this ghost is because of royal sister or some other evil spirit, Imperial Father will know with one look." Bai Sheng quickly handed over the things in his hands for the emperor to read. While the emperor was reading, Gong Dai slowly turned around. At this time, although there was no wind, his black hair and robe fluttered due to the leakage of internal energy from his body. That murderous look in his eyes was like that of the king of hell. Everywhere he went, There was silence. Chapter 255. On normal days, he was always cold and calm, but no one expected that once his reverse scale was touched, he would be so terrifying. Over the years, the officials were used to his indifference, but this was the first time they saw Gong Dai's murderous look. Those dark eyes were like whirlpools that could suck in people's souls and then mercilessly crush them. Emperor Gongcheng also didn't expect that Gong Dai would give him such a thing. Evidence of crimes, all of them were evidence of crimes. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't bring them all at once, Emperor Gongcheng believed that Gong Dai would have brought them all. This stack of documents, he was afraid that the left prime minister and his faction's evil deeds were all here. Seeing that Emperor Gongcheng was still in shock, Gong Dai smiled and knelt down on one knee. Imperial Father, taking advantage of this auspicious day, this son also wants to cleanse the imperial court in front of the world and restore the world's clarity. Imperial Father, please allow it. Emperor Gongcheng looked at him with complicated eyes. After a while, he put down the booklet in his hand and whispered, "Allow." Gong Dai smiled and then stood up. His eyes coldly swept across the platform. The people in that direction all felt their backs go numb from his gaze, afraid that Gong Dai was looking at them. First, this prince wants to report the fourth-rank Grand Physician. On the summer solstice of the 7th year of the Jew calendar, Grand Physician Shu took advantage of the opportunity to leave the capital to forcibly kidnap a woman in Shanshui River town of Long County. The woman couldn't bear the humiliation and killed herself in front of the local yamen. Shu Daran distributed countless wealth to cover up his crime and got away with it until now. I didn't. When the person was called, he was stunned for a moment, but then he quickly refuted subconsciously. How long ago was this matter? Even the woman's family was dealt with by him. How did Gong Dai find out? So he insisted that Gong Dai only knew some rumors and quickly crawled a few steps towards Emperor Gongcheng's direction. Your Majesty, this official is wronged. There is no such thing. Before Gongcheng could say anything, Gong Dai laughed. Whether there's such a thing or not, let's talk about it in Zhao prison. Although you've dealt with that woman's parents, she still has a younger sister who is very close to her and is willing to testify. After that, he ignored Gongcheng's hesitation and said directly, "Take him away. Take him to Zhao prison." Zhao prison. That was a place where death was certain if one entered. The moment the Grand Imperial Physician was dragged away, he shouted in panic. "No. I was wronged. Lord Lu, save me." Lord Lu, who was called out, felt his scalp go numb. He knelt there and didn't dare to say anything. In his heart, he cursed the person who had just been dragged away thousands of times. He didn't expect that Gong Ju's gaze would fall on him. Sir Fu Lu, rank 3 Guanglu. Gong Dai's eyes were cold as he spoke word by word, as if he was reciting something. In the autumn of the 9th month of the 12th year of the Jew calendar, in order to obtain 1,000 mu of fertile land at a low price, your son killed the original owner, Li Mao, and Li Mao's son. He caused the family to be ruined and left their home to Zhao territory. Do you think no one knows about this matter? Sweat dripped from Lord Lu's head. He knew that if Gong Dai didn't have absolute evidence, he definitely wouldn't make things difficult here. Didn't he see that the emperor didn't say anything about his decision? Therefore, his heart suddenly thumped, and he explained as if he was on his deathbed. Your Highness is wise. My son did it unintentionally. This official has already made it up to them. Oh! Gong Dai seemed to have heard a joke. He stood high up on the edge of the heavens-seeking platform and looked at him with a smile. Killing the father is a mistake, but killing the other party's only son is also a mistake. Making it up to them is forcing them to have no place to stay in the capital and leave their home. Lord Lu, go to Zhao prison. You can properly explain this to this Li's father. This time, Emperor Gong's gaze also became gloomy. He didn't really want to kill all of these people, but each one of them was sanctimonious. After committing such a wrong, they still dared to shamelessly boast about Moa's misfortune. They should also go to Zhao prison to suffer. So with a wave of his hand, someone immediately escorted Lord Lu away. Gong Ju's move made everyone present feel a chill run down their spines. In the past year, Gong Dai had actually rarely shown himself. Because he was busy with the bank, Zhao prison was temporarily put aside. But now, they clearly felt that the knife named Gong Dai above their heads hadn't disappeared. He was just temporarily ignoring them. Now, once they touched Gong Dai's reverse scale, this knife would become incomparably sharp. Instant death. When the commoners saw this scene, they wanted to cheer. Previously, so many officials wanted to impeach Gong Yimo and even said that the heavenly general phenomenon was Gong Yimo's responsibility. Their words carried little weight and they couldn't even get a word in. But now, seeing those majestic and awe-inspiring officials being dragged away one by one, they only felt relieved in their heart. They weren't so afraid of Gong Dai anymore. They even felt that he was the true impartial person. Although his methods were a little intense, it was fine as long as it was effective. Gong Dai was silent for a moment. Many people were hoping that Gong Dai would stop, hoping that he was just dissatisfied with them targeting Gong Yimo and punishing them to warn the others. Now, they knew that they were wrong. Today, they would wait here for a day. They promised that they wouldn't say a word. Gong Yimo could be a princess whatever she wanted. They promised that they wouldn't have any objections. But Gong Dai didn't get angry easily. Once he got angry, how could he be appeased so easily? Punishing people to warn the others, only his soft-hearted royal sister would do such a thing. Since he was young, he remembered the words that his royal sister had unintentionally said to him. Don't make a move, keep quiet. Once you make a move, cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Therefore, his slightly cold ink-black eyes once again landed on a person, primary third-rank minister of the Secretariat, Lord Liu. That seemingly honest old man didn't seem to expect Gong Dai to call him by his name. After all, in the eyes of everyone, he was famous for being honest. Whether it was corruption, bribery, or bullying the commoners, he had never done any of it. So he thought that he had a clear conscience and bowed to Gong Dai. This official is here. Gong Ju looked at him with a smile, but the faint coldness in his eyes made him shudder. This prince remembers that you were born poor, right? Do you still remember where you got the money to go to the capital for the imperial examinations? His words surprised Lord Liu. He didn't believe that Gong Dai would be able to find out about such a thing. For a moment, he panicked. His palms were sweaty, but he still had a trace of hope in his heart. Your Highness, if you have something to say, please say it. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly as he spoke slowly. You were born in a family of scholars in a small town in Ming County. Your parents died early, and you were poor from a young age. All of your family's income came from the child bride that your parents had arranged for you, Lady Zhao, when they were still alive. Later on, when you were successful in your studies, you wanted to go to the city to take the imperial examinations, but your family didn't have any money. In the end, it was your wife, Lady Zhao, who concealed her identity and sold herself to a brothel. That was how you earned your first money. Do you still remember this? Chapter 256. Gong Ju's words were like the sharpest knife, cutting into Liu Daren's flesh and blood. His face turned pale and his lips trembled. Gong Dai actually knew about this matter and even said it in broad daylight. For a moment, he didn't know how to refute. Gong Dai sneered, but his voice clearly spread to everyone's ears. You promised your wife that once you were in high school, you wouldn't despise her for being a withered flower. You would even formally marry her and compensate her for the suffering she had suffered over the years. So, she kept receiving guests and gave you all her money so that you could take exams again and again, make friends, and be in high school again and again. But in the end, how did you treat her? At this time, official Liu screamed. She was unlucky. He raised his head and made a solemn vow to Gong Ju. Not long after this official entered high school, she contracted that disease and was about to die. Otherwise, this official would have kept his promise. This matter, even if the heavens were broken, it was only Liu who was ungrateful and didn't constitute a crime. After all, one was willing to be beaten and the other was willing to be beaten. But Gong Cheng didn't say anything, because with his understanding of Gong Dai wouldn't just expose the other party's despicable character. Sure enough, Gong Dai smiled. You're right, she did die of the disease, but this prince found out that after you entered high school, you didn't want to marry a prostitute. So, you spent a lot of money to bribe Nanny Ju of Flower House and let her arrange for your wife, Madame Zhao, to serve a man with the disease. Sure enough, Madame Zhao soon contracted the disease and didn't have long to live. Gong Dai's words not only made official Liu's face turn ashen, but also made the people despise him. They didn't expect that the seemingly dignified and eloquent head of the secretariat was actually such a shameless and insidious man. Many of the women present looked at him as if they were looking at an animal. The sound of disdain was endless. But this wasn't the end. Gong Ju was the kind of person who wouldn't give a person a chance to rise again. It wasn't enough to beat him into the dust. Therefore, he added in a low voice, poor Lady Zhao thought that she was unlucky before she died, so she asked you to marry another noble lady as your wife. She hoped that she could see you one last time before she died. Unfortunately, you only cared about getting married and got the position through nepotism. She didn't get any pity from you even when she asked you to leave. She was even stopped by your new wife at the door many times and even sent to the officials. During the process, you didn't even show up once. Once these words were spoken, not only the commoners, but even the emperor was angered. Sometimes, he could tolerate some corrupt officials because no one was perfect. Their abilities were outstanding, so he would turn a blind eye to them. But now, how could such a person's character? He couldn't help but suspect this point. He even felt that in the future, the imperial examinations and the character test would also be included in the promotion. Gong Dai looked at official Liu being dragged away amidst the sound of disdain. He couldn't help but look at the left prime minister, and his lips curved slightly. Ever since the left prime minister sued the royal sister 3 times, he wanted to make a move on the left prime minister's faction. The reason why he let them go in the past was firstly, they didn't offend Gong Dai, and didn't infringe on Gong Dai's interests. Secondly, their real opponent was Gong Che. Now that Gong Che was coming back, Gong Dai didn't want Gong Che to have an easy time ascending the throne in the future. But who asked the left prime minister to be so blind, to actually want to make a move on Gong Yimo? Now that his left and right arms were chopped off, how would he feel? Would he feel good? Whether the left prime minister was in pain or not, he didn't know, but the people were really happy, especially when they saw official Liu being dragged away. They all cheered. This kind of gloomy weather couldn't suppress their joy. Beat up those Evilders who were at large. Was there anything more delightful than this? But this wasn't the end. Gong Dai tilted his head slightly, and looked at the standard first-rank Grand Military Officer Zheng. At this moment, Gong Yimo's side was in a different situation. The man in grey was covered in countless bloody wounds, crisscrossing. He really looked like a rag on the ground. He gritted his teeth. If this carried on, he would definitely die in Gong Yimo's hands. No. He couldn't die here. He still had a great cause to achieve, and he still had to leave his name in history. At this moment, it actually started to rain. Wisps of rain, under the gloomy sky, appeared especially silent. Many of the people saw Gong Yimo fighting a tough battle. At first, they felt that it was wrong for her to tear her own clothes, but as a woman, she was actually able to defeat such a powerful man, and a sense of pride grew in their heart. They felt that their Daiyu state's princess should be like this. After all, the founding empress of Daiyu state was also someone who could fight alongside her ancestors on the battlefield. And Gong Yimo's glory was comparable to that of the founding empress. In fact, she was even more brilliant than the founding empress. As the rain fell and the wind blew, it felt even colder. However, no one present seemed to feel it, especially the imperial guards. Their gazes were firmly occupied by the graceful figure in the rain, and they strongly hoped that the princess would tear the enemy into pieces. The rain wet her long hair, blurring the makeup on Gong Yimo's forehead and blush. Her small face was whiter than snow, and at this moment, she looked especially frail and pathetic. But her opponent was in a much worse state than her. The rain fell on Kang Rui's body, mixing with the blood oozing from his wounds and forming a pool of blood on the ground. The street was silent, so the sound of his heavy breathing could be heard clearly. "I'm going to kill you." Being suppressed and beaten up, he shouted like a trapped beast. This woman was the biggest obstacle to his master's great cause. If he could kill her, even if he really died, it would be an honor, and he would be remembered by the world in the future. Gong Yimo's left hand had a dagger studded with jewels. At this moment, she had a sword in her right hand and a blade in her left hand. Kang Rui could not hide his murderous intent. She smiled and looked at him as she spoke slowly. I'm going to use your head to achieve the first glory of this conferring day. It was raining, so there was no shelter at the open-air Wen Tian stage. Even so, no one dared to leave. Even the Empress Dowager was stunned by Gong Dai's aggressive murderous intent. This murderous intent reminded her of the day when Gong Yimo burned Long Hanyang. Gong Yimo's murderous intent was on the body of Gong Yimo. It was so similar. The rain fell down along Gong Dai's face, gathered at his chin, and finally dripped down. He looked at Grand Commandant Zheng, who was kneeling at the officials' table, and spoke coldly. Do you still remember how you went from a 7th-grade county official to today? His words made Grand Commandant Zheng, who had been in a high position for a long time, tremble all over. He was almost about to cry. If just now, they all hoped that Gong Yimo would not appear, then now, he wished that he could kneel and beg Gong Yimo to quickly appear. Only then would he have a chance to live. Unfortunately, Gong Yimo did not come. So when he heard Gong Dai's question, his chubby face tightened and he replied in a low voice, even with a sobbing tone, "It's all because of His Majesty's vast benevolence." Chapter 257. The Emperor's grace is vast and mighty. Gong Dai smiled. His smile was even more magnificent. Even in this kind of weather, his Ivaldor's face couldn't be eclipsed. At this moment, he was the king of hell that all officials feared. But in the hearts of the common people, Gong Dai was as good-looking as an impartial immortal, aloof and inviolable. But Gong Cheng didn't turn to the page of Grand Commandant Zheng's crimes, so he was somewhat puzzled. Although Grand Commandant Zheng was somewhat corrupt, his ability was good, so he had always been in an important position. What was it that made him prostrate himself and tremble just because of Gong Dai's words? Let this prince recall for you. Gong Dai said unhurriedly, at that time, you were just a small 7th-ranked official in a county of Huai River. Because you didn't reinforce the dikes, a lot of fertile fields were flooded, and a lot of livestock died. Because of your improper handling, a plague broke out. You haven't forgotten this matter, have you? He was all smiles, but the murderous aura on his body didn't fade at all. Sure enough, it was that matter. At this time, Grand Commandant Zheng gave up all his hopes and suddenly shouted, I beg your highness to be merciful. That time, it was this official's dereliction of duty. This official is guilty. As long as your highness is willing to let this official go, this official will be the first to agree to the princess's return. I beg your highness to be merciful. Gong Cheng felt that his face was lost. He made a mistake, and as long as he switched sides to Gong Yimo, Gong Dai would let him go. Even the left prime minister wished he could block his mouth. Gong Dai also smiled. He really didn't know why this person had such a naive idea. At that time, a doctor presented a prescription to cure the plague in time. However, in order to avoid the crime of not reinforcing the dikes and the crime of not handling the situation properly after the flood that led to the outbreak of the plague, you killed the doctor and let the plague wreak havoc. Later, you pretended to eat and live with the common people, and also contracted the plague together with them. You put on a show for a month. When everyone was helpless and there were countless casualties, you took out the prescription, saying that you personally tested 100 herbs and obtained it. In one fell swoop, you became the #1 official in Huai River, deeply loved by the common people. After the plague subsided, Imperial Father punished you, and the commoners even wrote a blood letter of 10,000 commoners as a tribute. Only then did Imperial Father not pursue the matter of your dereliction of duty. Furthermore, with the support of the people's hearts, your career as an official flourished and skyrocketed. Do you still remember these? As soon as Gong Dai's words fell, Grand Commandant Zheng fell to the ground. His face was ashen. Gong Cheng was furious. How many people had died in that plague? He still remembered, but all of this was because of the selfishness of the person in front of him. He couldn't bear it any longer. Someone come. Throw Zheng Qi into the death cell of Zhao prison and await his punishment. Yes. Soon Grand Commandant Zheng got down. Prime Minister Zhuo was truly scared now. Gong Dai was like a ghost, omniscient. If it was just slander, he definitely wouldn't have let Gong Dai do it. But Gong Dai said that he knew everything, and he had already presented the evidence. He had been forced to the point of being helpless. Too scary. Gong Dai wasn't human. Prime Minister's face was ashen, and his palms were sweaty. At this time, he didn't have any anger from having his helper cut off, only fear. He was afraid that Gong Dai would continue. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at the end of the street, his heart filled with anticipation. Gong Yimo, come quickly. Gong Dai had already gone crazy. The scene was deathly silent. Gong Dai suddenly smiled very understandingly. The auspicious time hasn't passed yet. Today is a rare auspicious day. Isn't everyone very energetic? How about this prince accompany you, to have a good chat? At this time of the rain, Gong Dai's smile was even scarier than the occasional thunder and lightning in the sky. Didn't these people say that the royal sister was an Avildor, and that was why there was lightning in the winter? Then he had to let the world know that even if there was an Avildor, that person definitely wouldn't be the royal sister. Time slowly passed. Not only was Kang Xiu's eyes red, even Gong Yimo was nervous. She believed that the other side was still waiting for her. Otherwise, Gong Dai would have come long ago. Now that Gong Dai didn't appear, the only explanation was that he was stalling for time for her, so she couldn't disappoint him, and she couldn't lose. In close combat, Gong Yimo once again drew a long bloody line on Kang Xiu's back. Kang Xiu gave a muffled grunt. His left arm was almost cut off by Gong Yimo. Are you afraid? Gong Yimo's voice suddenly sounded. At this time, Kang Xiu was about to lose his mind. He turned around to attack, but Gong Yimo seized the opportunity and left a bloody line on his chest. Gong Yimo, what's the point of dodging? If you have the guts, fight with strength. He shook his head left and right, his eyes red. But Gong Yimo's figure was like a ghost, and he couldn't keep up at all. Gong Yimo sneered. Her martial arts didn't rely on strength to win, so why should she fight with strength? Of course I know. In Lu Yi, strength is the most important thing. Her voice came from behind, startling the crazy Kang Xiu. He turned around to attack his back. After his attack missed, Gong Yimo's voice came from the left again. Do you feel tired? You've lost so much blood, don't you feel dizzy? Her words seemed to have a magical power that made Kang Rui, who had fallen into a state of madness, feel dizzy. He fiercely bit the tip of his tongue and said fiercely, "Don't mess with my mind. I, Kang Xiu, am the world's #1 expert. You are the world's #1. Gong Yimo suddenly appeared in front of him. But, you're just a dog in the hands of a woman. How did you? Kang Xiu was shocked. Even the sword in his hand hesitated for a moment, and it was at this moment that Gong Yimo slashed his collarbone. Lu Yi's exclusive name tag was revealed, and blood gushed out. This attack made Kang Xiu unable to hold on any longer, and he retreated. He had to leave, he couldn't stay here any longer. Gong Yimo would kill him. He ran forward, and Gong Yimo chased after him. Her devilish laughter sounded, with a trace of malice. Not only do I know that you're Lu Yi's man, I also know that your young miss who is proficient in heaven-earth-void techniques must be nearby. Just you wait, I'll definitely kill her. Her words deeply provoked Kang Xiu, and his body froze. He suddenly turned around and used his fastest speed to slash at Gong Yimo. I'll kill you, you slut. Poochie. The light of the blade flashed in an instant. He blankly rushed forward a few steps, and a bloody wound was left on his neck, gradually widening. How could this be? He was clearly the world's #1. Gong Yimo walked step by step behind him. Her hidden blade was still stained with blood, but it was quickly washed away by the rain. At this moment, a bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. It illuminated her face, making it snow white. She slashed down, and Kang Xiu's head flew out. The silver name tag also fell out, and was firmly grasped in Gong Yimo's hand. When a woman in the dark saw this scene, she almost crushed the door frame. Didn't I say it before? Gong Yimo smiled, revealing her snow-white teeth. At this moment, her smile was so strange. She raised the chain of the name tag high, and the silver tag swayed in the air, still stained with blood. At this moment, her eyes were shockingly bright. The world's #1 expert. This is my first glory after being reinstated. Chapter 258. When Gong Yimo came back with Kang Rui's head, she walked very slowly as she was exhausted. At this moment, there was another flash of lightning, making her look as terrifying as a ghost. She was dripping with water and her black hair stuck to her body. Her black collared top stuck to her skin, exposing her curves from head to toe. She was in a sorry state. She stood in front of the sedan and swept her cold gaze across the palace team. There must be a spy among them. But it didn't matter. Since she had already come this far, she didn't mind being more high profile. The official was completely stunned. He didn't expect such a powerful person to die in the hands of Gong Yimo. So when he saw Gong Yimo coming back, he quickly went forward and said with respect, "Princess, let's set off quickly. There's not much time left." 2 hours wasn't too much, but it wasn't too little either. Gong Yimo replied with a millimeter and flew into the sedan. Once she sat down, the official heaved a sigh of relief and shouted, "Set off." Even if everyone was afraid of Gong Yimo, they could only stand in their positions. But now that it was raining, there was no need to scatter the flower petals. The official didn't have any other thoughts. As long as the journey was smooth, he would be thankful. Gong Yimo could finally take a breather. Now, she was drenched. She took out a handkerchief and wiped off the smudges on her forehead and lips. As she calmed herself down, she thought about the whole thing. The rain outside was getting heavier, the winter thunder was continuous and unending. Even if the people present didn't say anything, they would be in a state of panic. So this was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but because everyone was crying, it was as if they were sending off a spirit. A strange phenomenon from the heavens. Gong Yimo had also encountered this day in her past life, but she didn't care about such things. Nothing major happened on this day in her past life, so even if the weather was strange, it was nothing more than a topic of conversation after a meal. Once it was mentioned, it was quickly forgotten. So, she didn't remember the exact date and didn't know that the Empress Dowager had chosen this day. But when she saw Kang Rui, she knew the reason. It was that woman. The woman who was said to be proficient in heaven-earth-void techniques and married King Lu Yi. She was here too. This Dai state was getting more and more lively. Thinking of this, she closed her eyes and rested. Thunder rumbled in the sky. Just as the guard of honor was about to reach the last road, the lightning that had been brewing in the sky finally exploded. A glaring light flashed past, and a lightning bolt struck down diagonally as if it had grown eyes. The thunder was deafening, drowning all the screams. The lightning was too close. In the chaos, there was a loud crack. They couldn't see anything. The people in the group screamed and fled in all directions. The Imperial Guards could not control the situation and the scene was in chaos. The eunuch carrying the palanquin had no choice but to dodge because the lightning bolt was too close to him. The sedans to the chairs, tous to the chair. This and SS tous to the chair to the chair to the chair. The golden lotus-shaped sedan chair fell to the ground with a bang, stirring up a cloud of dust. Gong Yimo was first shocked by the lightning. Then, as the sedan chair fell, she accidentally knocked her head on the jade table in the sedan chair. Blood flowed out. When the people in the dark saw the palace guards running away, they finally revealed a smile. The noise also made Gong Yimo stand up while enduring the dizziness. The moment she came out, she saw this Tus death. Her body was charred, and Thestu was also burned. Gong Yimo's sharp eyes suddenly noticed that after Thestu was split open, the pillar was shaped like a needle. It was made of pure metal, so they had made Thestu pointed. It was to attract lightning. At this moment, Gong Yimo couldn't help but be convinced by that person. First, it was the poison, the layers of clothing, and then this to make a lightning rod. This guard of honor must have been tampered with many times. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted from afar. Ivildor has appeared. Punishment from the heavens. In the chaos, Gong Yimo couldn't find the source of the voice at all. The vassal was even more perplexed. They shouted loudly for the palace guards to not panic and continue with their duties. The sedan chair moved forward. At this moment, a palace guard who was originally carrying the sedan chair sat on the ground. He was so scared that his face turned pale. I don't want to carry the sedan chair. She's an Evildor. If I send her to heaven's platform, I'll be sentenced to death by the heavens. This is the will of the heavens. He wanted to say more, but Gong Yimo's sword slit his throat. He fell backward and died with his eyes wide open. At this moment, Gong Yimo had already gotten down from the sedan chair. Her forehead was stained with blood, and she looked extremely scary under the rain. When she turned around, all the palace guards seemed to be frightened by her gaze. Perhaps they were really afraid that she was an Evildor, so they kept retreating. Gong Yimo held the sword in her right hand and Kang Rui's head in her left hand. She smiled faintly. With such a guard of honor, if they didn't dare to leave, she didn't want to sit there. Who knew what other tricks there were? It didn't matter if they didn't leave. Even if the heavens really obstructed them, it didn't matter, because she was definitely going. Sending assassins, attracting lightning to kill people, and spreading rumors to mislead people. What other tricks do you have? Just use them. Today, she would climb to heaven's platform even if she had to crawl. Seeing Gong Yimo turn around and leave, the officials and imperial guards were stunned. Princess. Wait. You can't go without a guard of honor. The officials hurriedly shouted. Without a guard of honor, it was not legitimate. She would definitely be criticized by the officials. Even if she ascended to heaven's platform, they would not admit it. But no matter how much he shouted, Gong Yimo had already run far away. At this moment, many commoners poked their heads out with complicated expressions. Whether it was the man in grey blocking her way, the lightning, or the rumors, Gong Yimo was humiliated, but she still killed the man. Even if the heavens blocked her way and spread rumors, she did not give in. Not to mention a woman, even a normal man would not be able to take it when faced with such a series of setbacks and being called a demon by others. But not only did Gong Yimo withstand it, she even went against the flow time and time again. Even now, she was defying the heavens. Such a woman, was she really an Evildor? Many people had this question in their hearts. If such an indomitable and unyielding woman was an Evildor, then what were the others? Bedbugs. Many commoners went out with umbrellas. They also wanted to go to heaven's platform to take a look. If she was really an Evildor, if the heavens really did not want Gong Yimo to be restored, then even if she ascended to heaven's platform, the heavens would not let her off. So they all wanted to see the results of today's coronation ceremony. Chapter 259. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, cold wind and torrential rain. This celestial phenomenon was so strange that people couldn't help but suspect that all of this was related to Gong Yimo. But where was Gong Yimo? Gong Dai estimated the time. His face was still calm, but he was secretly anxious. Could there be something that royal sister couldn't solve? Even the common people below were whispering. The voices of discussion added together were very loud, even covering the sound of the rain, so Gong Dai could hear it clearly. After missing the auspicious hour, even if the left prime minister's faction didn't dare to say anything, those upright and plain-spoken ministers wouldn't let Gong Yimo be so capricious. Except for the people in the imperial palace who had palace servants holding umbrellas, the ministers' clothes were all wet. There were so many officials, so many family members, and common people waiting here. If Gong Yimo didn't appear after the auspicious hour, they wouldn't give up until she gave them an explanation. At this time, the rain was getting heavier and heavier, like a torrential downpour. Even if the common people could bear it and didn't leave, how could the women of the officials bear it? The Empress Dowager didn't dare to look at Gong Dai, nor did she dare to speak, so she instigated Imperial Concubine Long to speak. They were fine, there were palace servants holding umbrellas, so Imperial Concubine Long wasn't very anxious. But after thinking about it, she still asked the person beside her to speak. Your Majesty, the auspicious hour is almost over. Do we still have to wait? This sentence was equivalent to asking the voice of everyone present. Emperor Gong was asked. At this time, he wasn't on the dragon throne, but on the heavens-seeking platform. Ordinary people couldn't stay on the heavens-seeking platform for long. It was a very sacred place, so at this time, he was also in the rain. It was the first time he was so embarrassed. At this time, He glanced at the end of the street and said again in a deep voice, "Wait for the auspicious hour to pass." Gong Dai looked at Emperor Gong gratefully. Perhaps Emperor Gong wasn't a good father, but he really cared about Gong Yimo. At this time, someone suddenly shouted, "Someone's coming." There was a commotion, and almost everyone looked at the end of the street for the first time. Sure enough, someone was running in this direction. Their first thought was that it was impossible for that person to be Gong Yimo. Perhaps something had happened to Gong Yimo and the palace maid had come to inform her. However, just as everyone was looking forward to it, that person was getting closer and closer. She was. The Empress Dowager leaned forward to take a look. Only Gong Dai recognized her at a glance. "Royal sister." As he spoke, he jumped down from the Heavens Inquiry platform and ran towards that figure. It really was Gong Yimo. Gong Cheng was shocked. When she got closer, Gong Cheng couldn't believe his eyes. Where are the guards of honor? What about the imperial army? Where's the crown? Where was the court uniform? Gong Cheng couldn't believe that Gong Yimo was only wearing undergarments and her hair was disheveled. What was she holding in her hand? It looked like a human head. When Gong Yimo came closer, many people were shocked to find that not only was her clothes disheveled, but she was also holding a human head in her hand. "Royal sister." Gong Dai was the first to run to Gong Yimo's side. Seeing her in such a sorry state, his eyes flashed with murderous intent. Who was it? Who dared to hurt royal sister like this? He wanted to tear that person apart. Gong Yimo didn't have time to talk to him. She had already run to the bottom of the Heavens Inquiry platform. In front of her were countless people and the emperor who had been waiting for her for a long time. This scene warmed her heart slightly. "Thank you." Gong Yimo gasped for breath and patted Gong Dai's shoulder. "Thank you for buying time for me. Let's walk together for the rest of the journey." As she spoke, she stretched out her hand to Gong Dai. Her hand was trembling slightly, obviously caused by exhaustion. This knowledge made Gong Dai's heart ache. He held her hand tightly and led her to the Heavens Inquiry platform. She really made it, and she was the only one. The people spontaneously made way for the two people to walk hand in hand. Gong Dai led Gong Yimo forward while continuously transferring his internal force through his palm. Gong Yimo felt that the dull pain all over her body subsided a little, and she was a lot more energetic. Together, they set foot on the first step of the 99 steps of the Heavens Inquiry platform. Emperor Gong looked at Gong Yimo with a very unpleasant taste. Who was it, and what could make her so embarrassed? Emperor Gong didn't understand. But her stubborn little face was full of determination. Even if she was in a sorry state, she was still the most dazzling person in the world. When she stepped on the last step, she took a deep breath and then knelt down in front of Emperor Gong. "Father, this son came late." "Not late, not late." Emperor Gong's heart ached when she knelt down, and he quickly helped her up. "The auspicious time hasn't passed, everything is not late." At this time, the people came one after another with umbrellas. They all wanted to see today's inquiry platform, whether the heavens didn't let Gong Yimo go, or Gong Yimo can really go against the heaven. "Dare I ask the princess, where is your honor guard? Where is the court uniform? Why did you come alone and so late? It's simply improper." A minister of the Qing school stood up. He was very upright and plain-spoken, and was not afraid of being suppressed by Gong Dai. Gong Yimo let go of Emperor Gong's hand and walked a few steps towards the edge of the inquiry platform. Then, she raised the head in her hand. This move scared the womenfolk into screaming, but Gong Yimo didn't seem to hear it. She smiled, revealing her snow-white teeth. At this time, her forehead was no longer bleeding, but it still looked very thin. However, the strength in her eyes and the indomitable fighting spirit in her straight back made her dazzling and eye-catching. It was enough to completely overlook her sorry state. "Who is this?" The minister frowned. And the Empress Dowager was scared out of her wits the moment she saw the head. If she didn't recognize it wrongly, this person was the #1 assassin by that very powerful person's side. Gong Yimo held the head with one hand, and the other hand loosened. A chain slid down, and the name tag attached to the end swayed in the air. Many people recognized it and were shocked. That was a name tag that only Lu Yi's nobles had. So Gong Yimo came so late because she killed a Lu Yi spy? Emperor Gong was also shocked. In Lu Yi, the higher the grade, the name tag's materials were different. This silver name tag inlaid with gold proved that the other party's rank was equivalent to Lu Yi's great general. Lu Yi's great general actually lurked in Daiyu state? Moa, what is going on? Why do you have Lu Yi's name tag? When the name Lu Yi came out, the Empress Dowager was scared pale. She never thought that the person who helped her was actually Lu Yi's man. Gong Yimo glanced at the Empress Dowager and sneered. This person is Lu Yi's #1 expert, Yun Lu's hidden Rus. He blocked my way and tried to assassinate me, and I cut off his head. That's why I'm in such a sorry state and came so late. Emperor Gong heard this and his eyes lit up. #1 expert. Chapter 260. Yes. Good. Emperor Gong suddenly laughed. You are indeed my daughter. The Empress Dowager was frightened. She thought of something and did not dare to speak again. However, Imperial concubine Long could not bear to see Gong Yimo being so glorious. She whispered, on such a joyous day, blood is spilled, and this bloody head is brought to the heavens inquiry platform. I am afraid the heavens will be angry. At this time, a thunder sounded, as if a good show was in response to her words. What a coincidence. Gong Yimo looked at the sky, then looked at the crowd and smiled fearlessly. As the princess of Daiyu state, I can get rid of a disaster for Daiyu state on the first day of the conferment. Even the heavens will cheer for me. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the rain seemed to have lessened a lot, but the thunder suddenly became more intense. The dense clouds and the brewing lightning caused fear in people's hearts. Only Gong Yimo could stand there with a clear conscience and not be afraid. Even Emperor Gong, who was standing on the stage, was a little suspicious. Did he do something to make the heavens angry? Let's begin. Seeing that everyone was convinced by Gong Yimo's fearless expression, Emperor Gong was afraid that the weather would change again, so he urged in a low voice. Everything else could be discussed later, but the conferment must begin quickly. Otherwise, the auspicious hour would be over soon. Gong Yimo naturally knew the importance of the matter. She placed Kang Rui's head on the only altar in the center of the platform, knelt on one knee, and swore loudly. I, Gong Yimo, swear here. Her every word was clear and slow. Her expression was solemn in the intertwining thunder. She swore, in my lifetime, I will be loyal to the country and love the country. I will regard the honor of the country as my personal honor. I will regard the worries of the people as my personal worries. Even as a woman, I will put the country first, and the emperor next, and myself last. I will take the world as my responsibility to bring peace to the world. I will sacrifice the blood of Lu Yi as a sacrifice to the heavens. If there is any violation, the heavens will punish me and the earth will destroy me. Gong Yimo's oath seemed to have some kind of mysterious power that made the thunder in the sky go crazy, and the sky turned purple. But at this time, no one cared about the sound of thunder. They were all shocked by her oath. That small body seemed to have an endless amount of power, open and aboveboard, unafraid of heaven's wrath, unafraid of God's punishment. Everyone was deeply affected, and boundless lofty sentiments were born in their chest. Good. Good. All right. Gong Cheng used the word good 3 times in a row. At this time, just as he was about to ask Wentian to continue, someone below shouted with inner energy. What's the point of being so dignified? Heaven and earth do not tolerate it, sending down heavenly thunder to destroy the ceremonial procession. Do you think that a few words can cover it up? Gong Dai's eyes immediately locked onto the crowd, but there were too many people below, and it was raining. Other than being able to lock onto the direction, he couldn't find out who that person was. Sending down heavenly thunder to destroy the ceremonial procession? What was going on? At this time, the Imperial Guards also arrived, but they had a good impression of Gong Yimo, so they didn't speak carelessly. Many people who were here from the beginning didn't know, but later on, the people couldn't help but tell them that the reason why Gong Yimo came to the heavens-seeking platform alone was because her ceremonial procession was struck by lightning. The people's hearts were in chaos, and no one dared to send her here. Like this, 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and many people looked at Gong Yimo with a subtle expression. Coupled with the increasingly frightening lightning in the sky, it was hard for them not to believe it. Heaven really doesn't like Gong Yimo? Is Gong Yimo really a demon? Everyone was doubtful in their hearts. At this time, Gong Yimo suddenly smiled. She stood up, slowly turned around, and looked at Wn Minute. She was clearly wearing the most simple and crude robes, her hair was clearly disheveled, and her forehead was broken, but the moment she turned around, there seemed to be a kind of king's prestige that made everyone shut their mouths. They looked at her, but didn't dare to look at her. Heaven doesn't like me. Gong Yimo smiled. At this time, the rain had almost stopped, but the thunder was getting louder, like a thunder dragon turning over, tearing the sky apart. Under such circumstances, her voice was still able to transmit her emotions to everyone's ears. Everyone was afraid of Heaven's anger and wanted to run away, but at the same time, they were shocked by her imposing aura and stood rooted to the ground, their hearts trembling. She raised her head and smiled at the sky, her eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. That murderous intent that seemed to have a substance that could reach the sky made everyone present feel like they were hearing the cries of resentful ghost. That was a kind of blood-curdling scream that made people's scalps tingle, but when they listened carefully, they couldn't hear anything. At this time, Gong Yimo spoke. She pointed to the sky, her aura was astonishing, and she laughed loudly. Look carefully. Today, I, Gong Yimo, will restore Rongji. Whether heaven likes me or doesn't like me, I can only obey, there is no choice. After she finished speaking, the sky let out the loudest bang of the day. It was as if heaven was rebelling against her words. Compared to the dark sky, she was so small. However, Gong Yimo wasn't afraid. She smiled and said to the emperor, who was already stunned, "Imperial Father, ask the heavens." Emperor Gong was really frightened. When Gong Yimo pointed to the sky and said that sentence, the arrogance and domineering aura around her, and her calm and casual attitude, all made him want to submit to her. So when he heard Gong Yimo's words, he almost subconsciously obeyed, and repeated what he said before. At this time, the rain had completely stopped, but the heavenly thunder seemed to be close at hand. Blue and purple flashed, and kept exploding. It was as if heaven was making its final resistance and roar. Such a rare and terrible scene made him stand on the heaven-seeking platform and speak with an undetectable tremble. Today, in the winter of the 12th month of the 21st year of the Ju calendar, the third emperor of Daiyu State, Emperor Gongcheng, is here to ask the heavens, "I have a daughter, pure and intelligent, with outstanding wisdom. She has contributed to Daiyu State and the people. She has a broad mind and can bear heavy responsibilities. I specially grant her the same position as the crown prince, and specially confer upon her the title of Feng Gui Rongji." At this point, he said with some apprehension, "Ask the heavens and earth, tell the people, ask for heaven's instructions, ask for heaven's instructions." At this time, Gong Dai, who was standing at the side, knelt down and said seriously. When he knelt down, all the imperial guards knelt down in unison. Ask for heaven's instructions. Because Gong Dai had a good impression of punishing the evil people, many people who still believed in Gong Yimo couldn't help but kneel down piously. When the officials saw Gong Dai kneel, they didn't dare to not kneel. So at this moment, everyone knelt on the heavens-seeking platform. Ask for heaven's instructions. This overwhelming call for heaven's instructions resounded throughout the imperial city, making everyone's hearts tremble. They were in awe. However, Gong Yimo didn't kneel. She looked at the sky and smiled triumphantly. Originally, she should have knelt down, but at this time, she only said one sentence. "Today, I, Gong Yimo, am restored. Ask for heaven's blessings. Give me an auspicious omen." Her words stunned everyone, and they all looked up. But when they looked up, what did they see? They saw the sound of thunder suddenly disappear, and the dark clouds receded like the tide. Following that, a ray of light shone down, and the clouds seemed to break apart. In an instant, tens of thousands of rays of light pierced through. Heaven was showing its power. Chapter 261. Those soft rays of light landed on Gong Yimo's face, lighting up her entire being. Her eyes were dazzling. More and more of these warm beams of light appeared, and they were of different colors. The dark clouds seemed to have shattered, and then the beams of light merged into one, finally forming a winding barrier. It was colorful and beautiful beyond compare. A vision from the heavens, flourishing prosperity. The heavens had really blessed them. This magnificent spectacle made everyone not dare to make a sound, especially Gong Cheng and Gong Dai. They stood high up and could see further. It could be said that they could see the entire imperial city in their eyes. Under the magnificent rays of light, the sparkling roof tiles and neat eaves were displayed. Gong Cheng seemed to have seen a peaceful and prosperous time. Under the rays of light, they slowly opened. Beside their ears, they could even hear the soft sound of strings coming from the sky. Gong Dai looked at this scene in disbelief. Finally, he looked at Gong Yimo. At this moment, Gong Yimo was not looking at him. She was just enjoying the rays of light. That sparkling face of hers was glistening, as if she would turn into a feather in the next moment. In his heart, he was suddenly afraid. This ability to change the color of the heavens and earth, was it really something that could be achieved by humans? Was it really something that mortals could have? If she couldn't, would his royal sister appear like this one day and then suddenly disappear? No, he could not allow this to happen. Gong Yimo saw that everyone was stunned and finally felt relieved. In her previous life, when the vision from the heavens descended, although she did not care, she still heard the idle chatter of people. The general idea was that the sky was originally covered with dark clouds and thunder, but after the rain stopped, in just a moment, thousands of rays of light burst out. It was a pity that the magnificent rays of light only appeared for a moment before it was gradually replaced by the sun. Therefore, in her previous life, Gong Yimo missed it and did not see the magnificent scene that they were talking about. But this time, she did not miss it. She watched as the rays of light gradually faded and were gradually replaced by the sun. This magnificent world was as clean and fresh as if it had been washed clean. She took a deep breath and sighed. Then, a strange smile appeared on her face. Sure enough, it was an auspicious day that was hard to come by in 100 years. That woman was probably going to explode from anger, so what if she was proficient in heaven-earth profound techniques? Could it be compared to her, the reborn prophet? Ha 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 ha. She finally couldn't hold back her pride and laughed loudly. When she smiled, everyone seemed to wake up from a dream. Now that the sky had cleared up, everything that happened just now seemed like a dream. The heavens had not only acknowledged Gong Yimo, they had even blessed her. What is this? This was a miracle. At this moment, everyone kowtowed spontaneously, and the eunuch standing at the side seized the opportunity to shout. Congratulations to the princess on her return. Heaven's blessing, glory to the world. The commoners hurriedly followed suit and shouted. Congratulations on your return to the throne, princess. Blessed by the heavens. Glory to the world. Heaven's blessings, ultimate glory, the world. That voice traveled far and wide, allowing everyone in the imperial city to hear it clearly. After the eunuchs and the commoners shouted 3 times, a smile finally appeared on their faces. The ceremony is complete. Wah! The people were boiling with excitement. With this decisive word, the ministers also knelt down to express their recognition. They sang in unison amidst the deafening cheers. Congratulations to the princess on her return to the throne. Princess's fortune is prosperous, unparalleled in 100 lifetimes. Truly unparalleled in 100 lifetimes. No, such a grand scene was hard to come by in 1,000 years. Impossible. Impossible. The Empress Dowager was shocked by the scene in front of her. That woman who was like the moon surrounded by stars, who stood on the high platform and calmly accepted the admiration of the people, who even the heavens had no choice but to obey her decree to bestow good fortune. Was she really just a bastard child whose father was already dead? Why was it completely different from what she had expected? Emperor Chong was awakened by the cheers of the commoners and regained his senses. He looked at the daughter in front of him with a complicated expression. This was his daughter Ah. This honor belonged to Daiyu State, to him, and to the people of the world. This moment would be recorded in the annals of history and be passed down for generations. The earth-shattering cheers made the entire imperial city as lively as the new year. Who else in this world could change the face of the heavens and make the thunder lose its color? Only the princess. And this princess belonged to Daiyu State. She would forever be the glory of Daiyu State. Hua Ju Wuyo almost vomited blood. She looked at the woman on the high platform. Her beautiful face was almost distorted. Impossible. She had clearly predicted that the weather would be strange today. She had even lost one of her most powerful generals because of this. Why did it end up helping that woman in the end? Thinking of how much the king valued this woman, she could only be glad that the king did not see this scene. Otherwise, the king would be even more curious about Gong Yimo and even more disappointed in her. But what she did not expect was that if she could sneak into Daiyu State, so could King Lu Yi. That person was even in the attic not far from her, smiling as he watched the scene in front of him. That pair of deep eagle-like eyes were filled with interest. His eyes were actually that kind of blue that was tinged with purple, like the most beautiful gemstones in the world. It was impossible to take one's eyes off them. Interesting, interesting. This Daiyu State was really getting more and more interesting, compared to Gong Yimo, their Lu Yi's goddess Hua Ju, who had been praised to the heavens by those people, was not even worth mentioning. How interesting would the expressions on those people's faces be if they knew? King Lu Yi stared at that woman and thought to himself. Gong Yimo seemed to sense something and raised her head. Their gazes clearly did not meet, but they seemed to have collided intensely. This made Gong Yimo frown slightly. Who was spying on her? King Lu Yi was even more surprised. His handsome face was hidden in the shadows. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a provocative smile. What a powerful woman! She was like a wolf in the grasslands or an eagle in the sky. No one could be careless in the slightest. The following process was very smooth. The officials congratulated Gong Yimo, the emperor and empress gave their blessings, and the emperor, who was extremely happy, waved his brush and added a secondary title, Jiyu Guo, to her title. This was not the end. The empress also gave her a secondary title, which was the word Da. Gong Yimo was ranked 7th, but with the word Da, she was ranked 1st among the princesses. Her complete title became Feng Gui Rong Ji Jiyu Guo Princess. She enjoyed the crown prince's consecration, and her status was equivalent to that of the crown princess. This was something that the officials did not expect. Normally, a princess's title would only have 2 words, and the empress would have 4 words. However, Gong Yimo was the first princess to have a title with 7 words since the founding of Daiyu State. Her high status was capped with 1 step. Amidst this shocking honor, the crowning ceremony, which had been bustling for the entire morning, finally came to an end amidst cheers. Chapter 262. After leaving the heavenly platform and returning to the palace, Gong Yimo had just changed into a new set of clothes. Before she could catch her breath, she was summoned by the emperor. It couldn't be helped. The matter of Lu Yi's invasion was too important. Otherwise, he wouldn't have called her so urgently. Gong Yimo naturally knew her priorities and hurried over. At this time, there were already many ministers gathered in the meeting hall. They had all gone home to change their clothes before entering the palace. Moreover, the way they looked at Gong Yimo was extremely strange, as if she was some rare object. What made her depressed was that Gong Dai also looked at her strangely. She couldn't describe it. If she really had to describe it, it was probably, he was thinking about whether to steam her and eat her, or braise her and eat her. Gong Yimo shook her head, shaking off these strange thoughts. Unfortunately, once Gong Yimo arrived, Gong Dai had to leave. Because he had exposed so many big cases today, so many people were waiting for him in Zhao prison. So even if he wanted to stay, he could only deal with the matter first. What he didn't know was that once he left, Gong Yimo felt her body lighten, as if some alarm had been lifted. There was an indescribable sense of relaxation. Moa! Emperor Gong waved at her. Come to Zhen's side. Emperor Gong was generally happy today, because the heavens had sent an auspicious omen. This proved that Daiyu State would only get better and better, because Gong Yimo, she was someone recognized by the heavens. Gong Yimo obediently sat on the seat beside him, looking like an obedient child. Where was the viciousness she had on the heavenly platform? No matter how you looked at her, she was a beautiful and luxurious princess. Gong Cheng was very satisfied with her and asked with a smile, "Moa, do you know the background of the person you killed?" Gong Yimo's expression became slightly more serious. "That person called himself Zong Xiu. I've heard of him when I was in Yuheng. His martial arts are very good and he is highly regarded by King Lu Yi. Most importantly, he is a retainer of King Lu Yi's fiancée, Hua Ju Wuyo. He is directly subordinate to the future Princess Lu Yi, Hua Ju Wuyo. Flower Boat Warrilis." Gong Cheng must have heard of this name, because she was the goddess of Lu Yi, the protagonist of the annual sacrificial ceremony. Suddenly, Gong Cheng thought of something and his eyes lit up. "That means Hua Ju Wuyo is also in Daiyu state." Gong Yimo smiled. "That must be so. Because Zong Xiu never leaves her side, the possibility of her being in Daiyu state is very high." Gong Cheng was a little moved. If he could capture Lu Yi's fiancée, then it would be a very good bargaining chip for the next matter. What's next? Naturally, it's the matter of the bank. Gong Cheng had already decided to let Daiyu state and Yuheng trade, and unify the currency and banknotes. Then after Yuheng, it would be Yuheng and Lu Yi. After all, as long as the country's door is open, it's impossible to close the door to others. Therefore, this idea appeared when he decided to trade with Yuheng. But how to trade with the other two countries? Let's not talk about Yuchi first, because Yuchi's internal problems were endless. The puppet emperor colluded with General Jadeface to fight against Empress Dowager Yuchi. Such a chaotic matter, Gong Cheng did not want to interfere. Lu Yi was also very troublesome. The current king of Lu Yi was different from the previous ancestors. Not only was his martial arts good, but his intelligence was also outstanding. After he took the throne, he made a lot of changes, and the country's strength had obviously increased. Speaking of this king of Lu Yi, although he had only been on the throne for a short 2 years, he was still very famous. Moreover, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai played a big part in his success. The previous king of Lu Yi was very pitiful. He was the brother of the current king of Lu Yi. Originally, it was not easy to secretly plot to attack Daiyu state and gather 200,000 troops, but it was ruined by Gong Dai alone. Later, he wanted to find Yuheng to pass through, but it was ruined by Gong Yimo. The successive failures caused him to lose the support of the people. In the end, he was easily defeated by his own brother, and he did not even know how he died. Therefore, the current king of Lu Yi was quite scary. He took the throne through a rebellion, but was able to win the hearts of the people in just 2 years. It could be seen that his methods were impressive. Therefore, if one wanted to deal with him and take the initiative, then one must have a bargaining chip in hand. Right now, was there a better bargaining chip than Lu Yi's goddess, king of Lu Yi's fiancée? As long as she was captured, the matter of the bank would be much smoother. However, she did not know where she was hiding. However, Gong Yimo was very clear that if she killed Kang Xiu, Hua Ju Wuyu would definitely not let her go. Then, she did not need to look for her at all. The other party would naturally send her to her residence. However, if that was the case, she would not be able to stay in the palace. After losing an expert like Kang Xiu, it would be impossible for the other party to infiltrate the palace. After Gong Yimo expressed her opinion, the emperor was rather moved. On the same day, he bestowed her a large residence to be used as a princess residence. In less than 3 days, she would be able to move in. After achieving her goal, Gong Yimo left in satisfaction. She did not want to continue living in the palace. She was not interested in dealing with those women. However, what she did not expect was that during these 3 days, Emperor Gong did not remain idle. Not only did he reward her with countless gold, silver, and jewels to decorate her residence, he also issued a secret decree. The general idea was, if anyone knew a handsome man and was willing to be a boy toy, they could sign up. When Emperor Gong himself issued this decree, he said it very vaguely. Because even if he had countless reasons, this was not something that was worth publicizing. Therefore, he did it very quietly. He thought it through very well. Gong Yimo was so outstanding. Only when she gave birth to a child in Daiyu state would he be at ease. It was said that a mother would be strong. At that time, she would become more powerful and independent. However, he was also very worried. Those ugly melons and cracked dates, he would definitely not take a fancy to them. They were not worthy of Moa at all. However, if a man was too outstanding, who would be willing to be a boy toy? This reputation was really not good to hear. Therefore, he thought for a while and issued another decree. That was, once selected, those with talent could still enter the imperial court as an official. However, as long as Gong Yimo did not abandon them, they would not be able to marry a wife. In their lifetime, they could only have one woman, Gong Yimo. After considering this, he waited for the news with a heart full of apprehension. Who knew that the next day, memorials to the imperial court filled up the entire imperial court? This is. Even someone as powerful as Emperor Gong was frightened by the scene in front of him. Were these memorials to impeach him or what? Chang Shi snickered at the side. Your Majesty, these are all memorials to the imperial court. Many people are waiting for your Majesty to choose. Everyone is looking forward to it. In just one morning, this servant has received several hundred taels of silver for spying. Emperor Gong was still unable to react. You mean, there are many people who want to be Moa's boy toy? These people, all of them are self-recommended. This is too scary. Has the world changed? Chapter 263. Chang Shi laughed again. Your Majesty, you're underestimating Her Royal Highness too much. In this slave's opinion, in this capital, there's no man of the right age who doesn't want to have a relationship with Her Royal Highness. Moreover, Your Majesty also said that talented people won't interfere with their career, so naturally, there are many people who recommend themselves. However, although there are some who sincerely admire Her Royal Highness, there are also many who want to borrow Her Royal Highness's hand to reach the heavens in one step. At the end, Chang Shi's smile paused for a moment before he continued. Of course, all of this still needs Your Majesty's approval. Gong Cheng nodded. That's how it should be. How's the arrangement of Her Royal Highness's residence? Chang Shi said, it will definitely be completed the day after tomorrow. Only then did Gong Cheng open these memorials to take a look. In the end, he found that most of them were the same. He didn't look at them one by one and directly threw them away. Today's weather is good. In the afternoon, Zhen wants to hold a poetry meeting in Plum Garden. Chang Shi, go and invite these people. Zhen wants to look at them one by one. Yes. Chang Shi was very efficient. In a short while, many people entered the palace. When Gong Dai heard the news, he directly crushed his teacup and pushed all the matters in his hands to Bai Sheng. He also entered the palace. When everyone had arrived, Gong Cheng slowly appeared. This poetry gathering was held in a decent manner. As soon as he arrived at the Plum Garden, he nodded with satisfaction. Then, when he saw all the men, he was even more satisfied. Before he came, he was worried that he would see some ugly melons and split dates or people who wanted to climb up the social ladder. But now, it seemed that many people here were the children of officials. The remaining ones that he hadn't seen before were most likely the favorite students of some officials. Each of them had a heroic appearance and were like dragons and phoenixes among men. If it was a poetry meeting, then it was a poetry meeting. Just as Gong Cheng was about to open his mouth, a person rushed in. Obviously, he had received the news at the last minute and came late. He was very handsome, with red lips and white teeth. His thick eyebrows and big eyes were very outstanding. But when he saw him, Gong Cheng frowned in dissatisfaction. Shiyi, what are you doing here? Shun Shiyi saw that the emperor was still somewhat restrained. He bowed and said in a muffled voice, aren't you going to choose a man for Gong Yimo? I'll recommend myself. His words made the emperor's face turn green and white. Although that's the purpose, who asked you to say it out loud like that? It would be very difficult for him to maintain his composure like this, all right? Even he himself felt that his actions were very shameful. Gong Cheng frowned and reprimanded, nonsense. As he spoke, he pulled Shun Shiyi aside. You're the future King Ping. It's true that I want to choose a man for Moa, but that's to choose a boy toy. What is a prince like you doing here? How infuriating. Shun Shiyi blinked indifferently. Your Majesty, why can't I? Aren't you trying to find a man for Gong Yimo? It's not like we're hindering their future boy toy. Gong Cheng emphasized in a low voice. Although I will not restrict their growth, they are not allowed to marry or take concubines for the rest of their lives. They can only have Moa, and they have to share her with others. This, can you accept it? Shun Shiyi snorted. Aside from the last point, I can accept it. Gong Cheng looked at him in bewilderment. Since when did Shun Shiyi have such deep feelings for Moa? It's useless even if you can accept it. When your grandmother personally comes to tell me that she can accept it, then we'll talk about it again. At the mention of his grandmother, Shun Shiyi wilted, but he still stubbornly refused to leave. Gong Cheng had no choice but to point to a very remote table. You sit there. Wait, don't talk. Shun Shiyi very reluctantly sat at the end of the banquet table, glaring at the people present like a tiger watching its prey. At this time, Gong Yimo was reading a book when she suddenly heard Gong Dai coming. She was so frightened that she quickly got up, not knowing what expression to use to face him. Towards Gong Dai, she was very complicated. First, she felt that in order to avoid future rumors and countless troubles, it was best to break it off as soon as possible. Second, she was afraid of hurting him. This made Gong Yimo very difficult. It could be said that she had never been so hesitant. Gong Dai, on the other hand, directly went to Gong Yimo's palace as if there was no one else present, and as soon as he came in, his face was gloomy and full of murderous intent. What's wrong? Gong Yimo looked at him and asked in bewilderment. When she saw that he was in a bad mood, she threw her previous thoughts out of the window and only cared about him. Royal sister doesn't know? He snorted. All of you, leave for this prince. Yes, the palace servants quickly retreated. Seeing that Gong Dai dismissed everyone, Gong Yimo immediately became alert and gulped. What happened? Gong Dai smiled and walked very calmly towards Gong Yimo. But Gong Yimo kept retreating subconsciously, which made him very dissatisfied. Imperial father is choosing a male pet for you. What? Gong Yimo was stunned. She thought of something and quickly walked out. What time was it? Even if he really wanted to choose, there was no need to be in such a hurry, right? But the moment she walked out, the moment she passed by Gong Dai, she was hugged from behind by Gong Dai. He hugged her very tightly. You, let go of me. Gong Yimo suddenly remembered that the person beside her was the most dangerous. The moment he came close, she exploded. And her ears were red, itchy from his breath. Gong Dai buried his head in her neck. I'm not letting go. You want to see those men? Gong Yimo knew that he was jealous and was very speechless. She softened her tone and said, let go of me first. I just want to find Imperial Father and ask him not to do this. Not now. Why? I don't want those men to see you. You're mine. Gong Yimo was at a loss. She twisted her body a few times and found that Gong Dai was holding her very tightly. She almost wanted to use force. Why was it like this? She was a little angry. You weren't like this in the past. You were so obedient in the past. You would never treat me like this. Gong Dai suddenly looked up when he heard that. How did I treat you? He kissed her hair very gently. Like this. Then, following her hair all the way down, he left several lingering and passionate kisses on her neck. Like this. That numbing feeling made Gong Yimo feel helpless and angry, but she couldn't do anything to Gong Dai. She could only pout and feel wronged. You would never do something like this in the past. You were so obedient in the past. Gong Ju suddenly chuckled in her ear. In the past? What if I told you that I wanted to do this to you for a long time? His words stunned Gong Yimo. Not only do I want to kiss you and touch you, I also want to possess you. Moreover, I've wanted to do this for a long time. I didn't do it in the past because I didn't dare to let you know. Thinking of the past where he was so careful that he didn't even dare to let her know, Gong Dai felt a little sad, but he wanted to seek comfort from her. His hand hugged her waist and his fingertips moved around her waist. His eyes were dark, as if something was surging in the depths. And now, you know, I don't need to, and I can't control myself. I want to have you all the time. Chapter 265. What was he going to do at the princess's residence? Of course, it was to be a male pet. Dong Quan smiled and glanced at Gong Cheng with his deep eyes. Then, it would be impolite of me to refuse. Eldest princess's residence. 2 days later, Gong Yimo finally had her own house. She was excited for a long time and walked around the residence. She found that the residence was really good. It was magnificent and there was even a big hot spring. She was really happy. After eating and walking around, Gong Yimo washed up and prepared to sleep. Such a big house and such a big bed. She could roll sideways. In the end, just as she happily jumped onto the bed, she suddenly felt strange because the quilt moved. At this time, she was lying on her stomach and looked up in surprise. She saw the quilt slide down and unexpectedly, a naked man. A man. Gong Yimo sat up with a swoosh and her whole body tensed up. What was going on? Why was there a man on her bed? When she saw the other person's appearance, Gong Yimo really wanted to vomit blood. Her eyes were wide open, full of disbelief. Why was this guy on her bed? Was the sky going to collapse? The scene changed to the day of the poetry competition. Gong Cheng saw that the other party agreed and was very happy. Then, he asked Chang Shi to investigate this person's life. If there were no problems, he would be sent directly to the princess's residence 2 days later. Chang Shi checked and found that this person came from a very remote western region. His results were good and he was admitted to the capital. Although his appearance was a bit exotic, but that was because his mother was a foreigner. Other than that, there were no other suspicious points. With a big wave of his hand, it was finalized. But what they didn't expect was that there was indeed a student from the western region. But after he came to the capital, because he was riding a horse, his face was disfigured before he could enter the city. Recently, the gauze was removed. That is to say, after he came to the capital, no one knew what he looked like before. But other people didn't know, but Gong Yimo knew. She saw the man lazily sit up from under the blanket. His slightly curly hair hung in front of his chest, accentuating his well-defined muscles and extremely masculine chest. Looking up, it was an exquisite collarbone and a handsome face with distinct features. His facial features were deep, and his forehead was full. There was a kind of captivating beauty to him, especially his pair of eyes that were so blue that they were almost purple. Sometimes, they would flash with a beast-like light. Your Highness. His deep voice was like a veil caressing one's ears. It was very pleasant to listen to. The faint domineering aura around him and the calmness of a mature man were enough to make any little girl blush. When he saw Gong Yimo in a daze, he couldn't help but smile. His smile was so handsome that one couldn't take their eyes off him. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am your boy toy, Dong Quan. Gong Yimo was numb, but the villain in his heart was flipping the table. What the hell is East Spring? This person was clearly the King Lu Yi that she had burned to death, Dragon City Limitless. That young monarch who had ascended the throne for less than 2 years and had received praise from both inside and outside the court, Dragon City Limitless. Even though Gong Yimo tried her best to restrain her emotions, the other party's keen senses were like that of a wild beast. He narrowed his eyes and slowly crawled towards Gong Yimo. His movements were like that of a healthy leopard. Your Highness, you seem to be surprised to see me, Chem? The last syllable at the end revealed a sense of danger. Gong Yimo swallowed her saliva and sternly said, I don't need a boy toy. Please get off my bed. She had to think carefully. This person wasn't staying in Lu Yi. What was his motive for coming to Dai Yu State? Or, should she just directly capture him? But the other party obviously didn't want to let her go just like that. Dragon City Limitless inched closer. His movements were very careful, just like a fierce beast that was close to its prey. No matter how he disguised himself, the wildness in his bones was hard to hide. But what should I do? When I saw Princess, I couldn't control myself. I just wanted to. He reached out to touch her face, but his hand was pushed away by Gong Yimo. She opened her eyes and very calmly said, Get off my bed. Otherwise, I'll be happy to personally throw you out. His hand was hit and felt a little numb. Dragon City Limitless looked at his hand that was hit. His heart was unconvinced, and his eyes flashed with anger. In Lu Yi, as long as he beckoned with his finger, countless women would flock to him. Moreover, he was very confident in himself. His figure and appearance were much better than Dau's, these weak scholars who couldn't withstand the wind. He believed that Gong Yimo definitely knew what beauty was, but she had rejected him. This made him very unhappy, but he was very interested in Gong Yimo. So even though he was a little angry, he suppressed it and approached again. Moreover, as he moved, the quilt continued to slide down, revealing his narrow waist and abdominal muscles. "Princess, are you not moved by me at all?" He smiled. That handsome face was oppressive, making Gong Yimo's whole body tense up. Sensing her nervousness, Dragon City Limitless smiled. He knew it. How could a woman not be moved by him? Who knew that in the next second, Gong Yimo would pounce on him and push him down on the bed? This position was very novel, and it made him a little helpless for a moment. "Princess, the night is long. Don't be impatient." His eyes flickered with a determined light as he revealed a mouthful of white teeth. He would soon leave Daiyu State. If he could have a taste of this princess today, it wouldn't be bad. Who knew that Gong Yimo would suddenly sneer? In the next second, he was wrapped up by Gong Yimo and thrown out. The moment he landed, Dragon City Limitless couldn't help but reveal his skills. He flipped in the air and landed lightly like a cheetah. The quilt fell to the ground. He was only wearing a pair of pants, and it was a little cold in the cold wind. Gong Yimo stood at the door and glanced at him. Suddenly, she smiled and closed the door. Dragon City Limitless only felt a stifling feeling in his heart that he couldn't vent. He waited at the door for a long time unwillingly. Who knew that Gong Yimo really didn't open the door and went to sleep? His face darkened, and he couldn't hold back his anger any longer. At that moment, even Gong Yimo, who was pretending to be asleep, could feel his murderous aura. It was the first time in his life that he was thrown out of the bed by someone. How long had it been since he felt this kind of humiliation? Dragon City Limitless was even more suspicious. Was it because his charm had faded, or was it because Gong Yimo didn't understand? She actually threw him out at such a time. Didn't she have any desire for the relationship between a man and a woman? But after his anger subsided, he coldly curled his lips again. At least Gong Yimo had succeeded in one thing. He was really becoming more and more interested in her. He only hoped that Gong Dai would find him later. This way, he still had a chance to eat this delicious little princess. Chapter 268. In Lu Yi, no one had ever dared to treat him like this. Everyone was respectful to him, and he had never experienced such humiliation and anger. What's more, he didn't expect that he would feel impulsive under such stimulation. No. It must be because of that sachet. I don't know if I died miserably. Her clear and melodious voice was like a seductive voice, making people unable to stop themselves. But when I think about how I can play with the noble King Lu Yi like this, I feel very impulsive. She didn't know if that one word of hers triggered Long Cheng Wuji, but the first reaction in his mind wasn't that she had seen through his identity, but that he hoped that she was really as she said, that she was very impulsive towards him. "You. How did you?" Long Cheng Wuji, who was slow to react, opened his eyes wide. He had ascended the throne not long ago, and in Lu Yi, he often wore a half-iron mask. Very few people had seen him before, so how did Gong Yimo know him? At this moment, he finally had a premonition of danger, but now, this scene made it impossible for him to escape even if he wanted to. He was the noblest eagle's son on the prairie. This was the first time he had been so passive. "Don't worry. I won't kill you." Gong Yimo's promise made him feel relieved, because he knew very well that Gong Yimo was the kind of person who would do what she said. But the malicious smile on her face made his scalp go numb. "So, in order to repay me for not killing you, scream out loud. Pa." Long Cheng Wuji gritted his teeth. Even if he died, she would never yield to Gong Yimo. "One day, I'll make you suffer under me until you die. Pa." Gong Yimo did not hold back at all. She even felt a little happy. "I will definitely kill you." She smiled faintly. "Anyway, you're not the first person to say that." Well, one more or one less wouldn't make a difference. As for Gong Dai's side, he successfully captured Hua Ju Wuyo. At this moment, Hua Ju Wuyo's face was gloomy. She didn't know how Gong Dai found her. In the carriage, she secretly glanced at Gong Dai's face. It had to be said that Gong Dai was really good-looking. Moreover, any young girl would probably prefer someone like Gong Dai who was cold and exquisite in terms of looks. Therefore, when she looked at him like this, she couldn't take her eyes off him. However, at the thought of their opposing relationship, Hua Ju Wuyo snorted coldly. "Where are you taking me?" Gong Dai had been resting with his eyes closed, ignoring her. This made Hua Ju Wuyo very angry. In Lu Yi, she was a goddess revered by all. It was Lu Yi's #1 beauty. However, the man in front of her only glanced at her when she was brought out. After that, he never looked at her again. This made her very frustrated. "Hey, am I not beautiful?" Seeing that he was ignoring her, Hua Ju Wuyo sat closer to him. The sons and daughters of the grasslands were not as bashful as those of the interior. They dared to love and hate, and said whatever they wanted. However, even though she took the initiative to get closer, Gong Dai still ignored her. She couldn't help but become even angrier. In the end, she sat beside Gong Dai. At this moment, Gong Dai suddenly opened his eyes and looked at her coldly. This glance made Hua Ju Wuyo feel as if she was facing her own cousin. She glared at him indignantly, but she appeared fierce on the outside. "I'm Lu Yi's #1 beauty. Why aren't you looking at me?" Gong Dai finally spoke. However, his next words made Hua Ju Wuyo's hair stand on end. "If you don't sit back down, I don't mind pulling out your tongue." A threat, spoken in such a flat tone, really made Hua Ju Wuyo's scalp tingle. Although she was indignant, she still sat back down. If Longcheng Wuji saw her obedient look, he would be surprised. After sitting back down, the more Hua Ju Wuyo thought about it, the more frustrated she felt. "I know you like Gong Yimo. Could it be that with my looks, I can't compare to Gong Yimo?" This was what she was most indignant about, and it was also the reason she came to Dai Yu State. However, last time, she only saw Gong Yimo from afar, and because of the rain, she felt that although Gong Yimo was beautiful, it was just SOSO. However, she didn't expect Gong Dai to really look at her. In the end, he actually smiled. Usually, people who didn't smile often looked very moving when they smiled, just like Gong Dai. At that moment, Hua Ju Wuyo clearly felt that she liked her cousin, but she couldn't help but feel her heart beat a few times, and even her breathing became sluggish. "There's no need to compare," he said. "You don't have the right." Gong Yimo was tired of whipping, so she found a chair and sat down. Then, when she saw Longcheng Wuji's current appearance, she was a little amused. At this moment, his hair was spread out, and that long curly hair fell on his chest. Although he wasn't exercising, his chest was violently rising and falling. Under the light, it was as if his whole body was suffused with a pink glow, and it was very appetizing. Gong Yimo held a cup of tea in her hand, and she slowly drank it. There were many whip marks on his body, but they weren't serious, and would probably heal in a few days. There were also a little bit of wax, which was very eye-catching. At this moment, he was frowning with his eyes closed, and his whole body was soaked in a thin layer of sweat, as if he had just done some intense exercise. Even when he opened his eyes to look at her, there was a hint of confusion. This made Gong Yimo feel very accomplished. In her previous life, the thing that left the deepest impression on Gong Yimo about Longcheng Wuji was that he had countless concubines. His concubines were really many, and all of them were very beautiful. She would often hear rumors about him having multiple concubines at night, and it was very colorful. This made Gong Yimo very curious, whether he was really that powerful. Originally, she didn't want to mess with him like this, but who told him to touch her the moment he saw her, thinking of things that were not suitable for children? Then she could only provoke him, and give him an unforgettable night. Thinking of this, she got up, and brought a cup of tea to Longcheng Wuji's mouth. He seemed to be very thirsty, and without any precaution, he drank the entire cup of tea. In the process, his Adam's apple moved, and those low fluttering eyelashes made Gong Yimo have the illusion that he was a docile cat. But she was also very clear. This time, she took advantage of her previous life, and seized the opportunity. If they were to fight face to face, she wouldn't have this opportunity to mess with him, and he wouldn't be a cat. If she really wanted to compare, he would probably be an eagle or a cheetah. If you were confused by his mask, you would only die a terrible death. But this didn't stop her from enjoying his docility. Seeing that he was so quiet, Gong Yimo was happy, and said a sentence that was very annoying. How is it? This is my special trick. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Chapter 269. Long Cheng Wuji no longer had the strength to glare at her. He secretly swore in his heart. Whatever he had suffered today, one day he would repay it all on Gong Yimo. Double the repayment. Gong Yimo did not need to guess to know what he was thinking. But she did not mind. Because she knew that after today, Long Cheng Wuji would not have any power over her. She lowered her eyelids and hooked a thin chain from his hair. He was quite thoughtful. He actually hid that thing in his slightly curly long hair. Usually, when he tied it up, he would also hide it in his hair bun. Realizing what she was thinking, Long Cheng Wuji suddenly opened his eyes wide. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness. Impudent, stop it. But no matter how ferocious his expression was, Gong Yimo did not slow down at all. Luyi was a very mysterious country. Their country also had a unique tradition that other countries did not have. For example, why would their high-ranking officials have a nameplate on them? This nameplate was given to them when they were born. It represented their identity, status, and everything. In Luyi, they called it the life nameplate, and there was a very important point. These nameplates could not be replicated. In Luyi, there was a very mysterious lake. The water in the lake was known as the sacred water. When every noble was born, if they wanted to make a nameplate, they would have to find the guardian of the sacred water lake, an old man. That old man would take a strand of hair from a fetus to make a nameplate. The nameplate made from his hands, when placed in the water, would emit a faint fluorescent light. And the nameplate was fused with the first strand of hair of a newborn baby. Naturally, it could not be replicated. At least, this was what Luyi people believed. And then they protected their nameplates as if they were protecting their lives. And Gong Yimo actually wanted to take away his nameplate. This was simply trampling on his dignity as a monarch. This was something that could not be allowed. So under this provocation, Long Cheng Wuji actually broke free from the ropes. He suddenly pounced towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo could not dodge in time. Her hand was tightly holding onto his nameplate. She was actually pounced on, and the moment she fell to the ground, she snapped the chains and directly kept the nameplate into her space. So when King Luyi regained his senses, he was shocked. He searched his body but could not find his nameplate. His eyes darkened, cold and angry, he looked at Gong Yimo. Give it back to me. The aura of a high position suddenly exploded. That gaze, it was as if he wanted to tear her into pieces. This stunned Gong Yimo for a moment. This was the king of Luyi. If it was any other time, she wouldn't have had such an opportunity. However, one wrong step led to many wrong steps. Now, the initiative was in her hands. She directly used her martial arts to flip over, shaking off Long Cheng Wuji and retreating a few steps. Don't even think about getting what's in my hand. Gong Yimo. Long Cheng Wuji stood up. His originally blue eyes were purple, but at this time, they showed a strange deep black. Under his high nose, his thin lips were tightly pursed. He stared at Gong Yimo like an eagle in the sky staring at its prey. He wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. Even though he knew he was no match for her, he still fought with Gong Yimo. Anything could be snatched, but nameplates were definitely not. After completely releasing his aura, even if his martial arts were not as strong as Gong Yimo still found it very difficult to deal with him. King Luyi's martial arts were very powerful and he was very strong. Every time he attacked, Gong Yimo did not dare to face him head-on. She kept retreating. Then they fought from the room to the courtyard. Many servants ran out to see. They did not know what was going on. They only saw that the boy toy was suddenly fighting with the princess. They did not dare to delay and quickly slipped out to inform the others. Although Gong Yimo had the upper hand, she was also fighting with great difficulty and was unable to escape. Really, isn't it just a nameplate? Just treat it as giving it to me. Gong Yimo purposely provoked him, looking for a flaw. King Lu Yi was so angry that he laughed. He slightly curled his lips. At this moment, his upper body was naked and his muscles were bulging. In the night, he was full of wild elegance. He was very tall. Especially when he was standing like this, facing others, that overwhelming aura made people feel suffocated. In Lu Yi, there are only two situations where you will give away your nameplate. The first is when I lose. His eyes were fixed on Gong Yimo, not relaxing. The second is when you exchange your nameplate with your wedding wife. Gong Yimo, are you going to marry me? Gong Yimo smiled lightly. Why can't it be you who lose? Completely defeated by me. His pupils shrank and there was a trace of killing intent in his cold eyes. You forced me. He originally did not want to kill her. Following that, he suddenly whistled. That sound penetrated extremely far. Not long later, 7 to 8 experts jumped down from the roof. All of them were tall and big and all of them were expert. If you hand over your nameplate now, I can still let you off. Otherwise, you can only follow me back to Lu Yi. Long Cheng Wuji gave his final ultimatum. Gong Yimo flicked her sleeves and grabbed a hidden blade in her hand. She smiled and said, "Why don't you just bring me away?" So, the great King Lu Yi also has misgivings? When Long Cheng Wuji heard that, his eyes narrowed like a tiger whose beard was grabbed, instantly becoming extremely dangerous. But Gong Yimo seemed to have not provoked him enough and continued. I think it's because you didn't bring many people. If you bring me, you won't be able to escape from Gong Dai's pursuit, right? Ha 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 ha. The great King Lu Yi also has fear. Shut up. I won't. Long Cheng Wuji laughed. Gong Yimo, there will be a day when I will make you cry and beg me to take you. Gong Yimo was also angered by his words as she slowly raised her hidden blade. Don't think that just because you have more people, I will be afraid. I will cripple you right now. Just as both sides were about to start fighting again, suddenly numerous archers jumped onto the 4 roofs. They were all wearing soft armor and holding onto bows and arrows. Their actions were uniform and in an instant, they aimed their arrows at Lu Yi and the rest. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo was delighted. Gong Dai really came at the right time, and his arrival meant that the matter had already been settled successfully. As expected, Gong Dai lightly jumped down from the roof and landed beside Gong Yimo. When he saw that Long Cheng Wuji's upper body was half naked, those ambiguous marks made his pupils constricted. When he looked at him again, his eyes were filled with killing intent. King Lu Yi laughed. Gong Dai? Don't tell me you think that with so few people, you will be able to defeat me. Gong Dai looked at him coldly and then stretched out his hand. His hand loosened and a nameplate fell out. The 2 words Wuyo especially irritated Long Cheng Wuji's eyes. His premonition had indeed come true. Not only was Gong Yimo stalling for time to deal with him, she had even sent people to capture Wuyo. Gong Yimo laughed. Don't be so nervous. King Lu Yi, please be assured, we will not harm Miss Wuyo. What do you want? Chapter 270. No matter how unwilling Long Cheng Wuji was, he could only bear with it. It would be unwise to go head-to-head at this point. Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai with a hint of pride in her eyes. Then, she smiled at Long Cheng Wuji. It's very simple. My Dai Yu state wants to trade with Lu Yi. Long Cheng Wuji sneered. So you captured Wu Yu? He looked at Gong Yimo, then at Gong Dai. Is this the sincerity of your Dai Yu state? Gong Yimo did not back down. Lu Yi sent people to assassinate me and almost caused me to lose my position. Is this your sincerity? Her gaze did not back down at all. Long Cheng Wuji stared at her for a long time. Then, he chuckled. As expected, you are Lu Yi's greatest opponent. He waved his hand, and the people protecting him all retracted their power and walked behind him. Gong Yimo also softened her tone and bowed to him. She looked very friendly and giggled. It's just reciprocity. I believe that our little friction these days will not affect our future cooperation, right? Long Cheng Wuji was amused. If Gong Yimo did not know who he was from the start, would he have lost so badly? She still had the nerve to talk about cooperation. However, he could only think about it. People in their positions would not lose the big picture for small gains. Hence, he laughed coldly. Yes, it won't affect. Not only that, I am very satisfied with your hospitality tonight. It makes me very comfortable. As he spoke, he looked at Gong Dai provocatively. However, he gritted his teeth and said to Gong Yimo, "One day, I will let you have a try." Feeling the sudden burst of cold air from Gong Dai, Gong Yimo's smile froze. You're welcome, you're welcome. This, forget it. The other party snorted. In that case, see you tomorrow. With that, he strode away. He had suffered enough blows today. Firstly, he had underestimated his opponent and didn't put a woman in his eyes. Secondly, he didn't know that Gong Yimo actually knew him. However, a loss was a loss. Not only did he lose his name tag, but he also lost his fiancée. It seemed that there would be a tough battle tomorrow. With Gong Yimo and Gong Dai in the Dayu state, it was too troublesome. Thinking of this, his eyes flashed with a trace of calculation, and his figure disappeared from the princess residence. Seeing him leave, Gong Dai waved his hand and all the archers withdrew. The servants quickly ran out and knelt in front of Gong Yimo in fear. Gong Yimo didn't have the mood to blame them. She waved her hand and sent them back to rest. She knew the emperor's character very well. The reason why these servants didn't dare to come near was probably because of her imperial father's intention. He was afraid that they would disturb her favorite male pet. This reason was very vexing. Seeing that everyone had left, Gong Yimo also prepared to rest. However, when she turned around, she realized that Gong Dai hadn't left yet. Gong Yimo pretended to yawn and prepared to leave. Aya, I'm so tired. It's already so late. You can do as you please. I'm going to sleep first. With that, she prepared to slip away. However, how could Gong Dai be so easily dismissed? He chuckled softly. Sleepy. Royal sister, I won't disturb you, but I want to ask, what did you do just now? Where did his clothes go? Gong Yimo's back view suddenly froze. Then, she racked her brains to come up with a lie. At this moment, Gong Dai walked to her side. Seeing her rolling her eyes, his smile became gentler. Royal sister, if you're lying to me, I'll be very angry. Although he said this in a very calm tone, Gong Yimo felt a chill run down her spine. It was really cold outside. However, without sending Gong Dai away, she didn't dare to enter the house. This was really, I wanted to find his name tag, so I took off his clothes. After all, who knows where he hid it on his body? Gong Yimo regretted it. She shouldn't have tried to delay time, she shouldn't have abused him for a moment of prank. She was wrong. Gong Dai really didn't expect that this kind of obvious lie would come from his weird royal sister. Royal sister, you're being naughty again. His words were like a death sentence for her. Gong Yimo wanted to cry but no tears came out. However, he didn't see it. Millimeter. She just didn't want to admit it. What could he do? Thinking of this, she gave an arrogant humph. Forget it if you don't believe me. I'm going to sleep. See you tomorrow. Saying that, she ran into the house with her fastest speed and closed the door with her fastest speed. But at the last moment when she closed the door, Gong Dai's hand was stuck between the two doors. Gong Yimo braked in time and almost clipped his hand. Do you have anything else? Through the gap of the door, Gong Yimo was filled with vigilance. Gong Dai smiled faintly and reached into his arms to pull out a paper bag. He opened the paper bag and a faint smell of burnt sugar wafted out. Gong Yimo took a whiff and knew that it was Sugar Heart Pavilion's sweet biscuit. And it was freshly baked. She looked at Gong Dai in disbelief. You went to kidnap Flower Boat Wu Yu and went to Sugar Heart Pavilion on your way back? And this sweet biscuit was only sold in the morning. That meant that Gong Dai had forced them to specially bake a batch for him in the middle of the night. What she didn't expect was that they didn't sell their desserts over the night, so they had specially baked one for her. Gong Dai passed the biscuit in his hand forward. I know that you have something on your mind and won't be able to have a good dinner, so I brought some food for you. Saying that, he smiled and added, it's freshly baked so it's very sweet. I specially asked him to bake it for a while longer so it's very crispy. Gong Yimo swallowed her saliva. She really didn't eat much at night. Not only did Gong Dai understand her well, he had even put this understanding into action. She was really touched. So after hesitating for a while, she finally stretched out her trembling hand through the gap of the door, intending to take away his delicious food and eat it all for herself. But what she didn't expect was that just as she stretched out her hand, it was grabbed by Gong Dai. Seeing him suddenly smiling at her, Gong Yimou's heart thumped hard. Oh no! She had fallen into his trap. Gong Dai pulled her hand gently and Gong Yimou fell out of the door and into his arms. He smiled lightly, but the words that came out of his mouth made Gong Yimou feel that a great disaster was about to befall her. Don't be afraid. I just want to know how the marks on King Lu Yi's body came about. He felt Gong Yimou's body suddenly tense up. She didn't even know how to resist being hugged by him. He narrowed his eyes and said faintly, "Don't worry, I'll just take a look." Gong Yimou thought that if she gave Gong Dai a kick and ran back quickly to keep all the props, would it be too late? But that was obviously impossible. And the source of all this trouble was the biscuit in her hand. Where was her integrity? She hugged the biscuit and refused to let go. She even cried. Why was she so easily fooled by a biscuit? This was simply illogical. Chapter 271. Gong Dai dragged her into the house unwillingly. The house was filled with a special smell. It was fine just now, but now that she smelled it, Gong Yimou blushed. This is... Gong Ju raised his eyebrows slightly. He was experienced and knowledgeable, so he immediately recognized the smell. At this time, he looked at Gong Yimou with a very dangerous and calm expression. It was as if he had caught the little fox's weakness and could threaten her to hand over all the snacks. Gong Yimou was speechless. What kind of analogy was she using? Gong Dai walked towards the study table. Gong Yimou quickly grabbed his hand and looked at him pleadingly. Gong Dai, aren't you sleepy? Gong Dai's eyes were smiling, but he still pretended to be cold. I'm not sleepy. Gong Yimou rolled her eyes. Then are you hungry? She waved the biscuit in her hand and said softly, "Let's have some snacks." Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh, but he still didn't relent. I'm not hungry. I'm not eating. Then, Gong Yimou was at a loss for words. In the end, she steeled her heart and said, "Look then, anyway, she didn't do anything." Yes, he did not do anything. She let go of his hand. Gong Dai looked at her and then continued to walk towards the study table. At this moment, he first saw the whip on the table, the half-burnt candle, and the black rope on the floor. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Finally, he sat on the chair that Longcheng Wuji sat on previously. Gong Yimou couldn't help but lower her head and didn't dare to look. What is this? He calmly picked up the whip. Gong Yimou was like a child who had done something wrong. She whispered, "Whip. What about this?" She glanced at it. Wax, candle wax. Gong Dai suddenly glanced at her. It looks interesting. Royal sister, do you want to try it on me? Gong Yimou widened her eyes. Don't, it's not fun. Gong Dai didn't allow her to reject and ordered domineeringly. Come here. She had just said these two words to Longcheng Wuji. Every dog has its day. Gong Yimou wanted to cry but had no tears. She slowly moved towards him, but he reached out and pulled her into his arms. You like this? He suddenly closed the distance. Gong Yimou nervously shook her head. But Gong Dai said, "It's okay, you can play with me in the future." Gong Yimou forgot to respond. She didn't know how to answer. At this time, Gong Ju pulled the paper bag from her hand. Aren't you hungry? Gong Yimou stared at him blankly. Could she be hungry now? Her silly expression melted Gong Dai's heart. He couldn't help but kiss her cheek. Gong Yimou suddenly wanted to resist. How could she sit on Gong Dai's lap? But in the next second, Gong Ju hugged him tightly. His eyes were cold, and his murderous intent overflowed. Or do you want to continue talking about these things? Royal sister, I'm curious, why do you have some in your hands? His cold aura seemed to be tangible. And, it's a set. Gong Yimou didn't dare to move anymore. Gong Dai was satisfied. He hugged her, broke the biscuit into pieces and fed her little by little. Question, such a handsome and cool guy is hugging and feeding you gently. Are you touched? Gong Yimou, I don't dare to move, I don't dare to move. Scary. What kind of thoughts are these? Sensing Gong Yimou's absent-mindedness, Gong Dai pinched the tip of her nose in annoyance. So, you're still thinking about other men when you're in my arms? Gong Yimou hesitantly swallowed the biscuit in her mouth and tried to reason with him. Gong Dai. You're wrong. You. Eat the biscuit. He forced the biscuit into her mouth. Seeing that his expression had darkened, Gong Yimou didn't dare to say anything else and ate the biscuit obediently. During the process, Gong Ju watched her nervous little face as he fed her. His heart was filled with both happiness and powerlessness. Feeling the softness of her soft lips every time he fed her, Gong Dai's expression gradually relaxed. The murderous aura finally dissipated. He was actually angry, especially when he saw these props. Even though he knew that Gong Yimou wasn't at a disadvantage, he didn't want her to see any other man besides him. So he was serious about what he said just now. If she wanted to play this way, he would play along. But now, when he looked at her, he only felt pity. Do you remember? Back then in the cold palace, when we met for the second time, you did the same. You broke the steamed buns bit by bit and fed them to me. Gong Yimou's cheeks slowed down. She actually didn't remember many things that happened so long ago, especially some things that she thought were trivial. Gong Ju lowered his eyelids and continued to feed her. Maybe you don't remember clearly, but I remember everything that happened between us. Gong Yimou was about to speak when Gong Dai stuffed another biscuit into her mouth. I still remember that when I was young, I focused on practicing martial arts and didn't want to waste any time learning literature. At that time, you took a small willow whip and hit my palm. It didn't hurt, but you smiled proudly and told me that martial arts can establish a country, literature can pacify the country, and an outstanding man can't be biased. At that time, I was very obedient and went to write. Do you know why? Gong Yimou forgot to chew the biscuit in her mouth. She looked at him and asked in a muffled voice, why? Gong Dai smiled. In an instant, he was as beautiful as a fairy in a painting. He stroked her hair. Because an unoutstanding man is not worthy of you. Not only do I want to be outstanding, I want to be the best. His words made Gong Yimou fall silent and lower her head. After leaving the cold palace, I realized that something seemed to have changed. I didn't want to leave you and walk out of your sight. I wanted to go back to the cold palace, just you and me. Gong Dai recalled the past. Those memories were like a painting that unfolded very clearly. Her every frown and smile were engraved in it. But later, I gradually understood that you are different. You don't belong to the cold palace, and even, you don't belong to the Dai state. I can choose to follow you, but I don't want to be behind you. You will never understand when I saw you in the West Continent. He described it tirelessly. Although his tone was cold, it was impossible to ignore the affection and sweetness in his voice. I thought that I was hallucinating. But when I saw you, at that moment, I actually had the thought that I was willing to die in a hallucination. He laughed softly. But it was really you. You sent yourself to my side, so I became more and more unable to control myself. All of this is your sin. His fingers landed on her eyebrows and eyes. His tone was extremely affectionate. You made me unable to control myself and fall in love with you. But I could see you, but I couldn't touch you. He sighed softly. You might not be able to imagine it, but when we were in the palace, I didn't even dare to look at you. I wanted to keep staring at you, but I was afraid that you would find out about this abnormal feeling and hate me. So, I endured it again and again. I didn't dare to do anything out of line. Chapter 272. That's great. He suddenly smiled. You've discovered my feelings, so I finally don't have to endure any more. Those days where my heart clearly longs for something, but I can only endure it. It's too painful. I don't want to live such a life for even one more day. Now, I just want your eyes to reflect the scene of me kissing you. I want you to see me going crazy for you. I want your eyes to be tainted with lust. As he spoke, he fed the last bit of the biscuit into her mouth. Then, he lowered his head and snatched it over. Their lips touched for a moment, and both of them could taste the cloying sweetness. Gong Yimo wanted to retreat, but it was too late. She was hugged by Gong Dai, and they were getting closer and closer. His eyes were really beautiful, and just as he said, the madness in the depths of his eyes made her feel as if she was being burned by fire. She wanted to retreat, but her lips were sealed by him once again. And this time, she could clearly feel the difference. The scorching heat from his body was simply abnormal. If this continued, she would definitely be eaten up today. Gong Yimo was tightly entangled by him, but her eyes were fixed on the sachet on the table. It must be this sachet's doing. She reached out, wanting to take the sachet and put it in her space. But when she reached out, Gong Dai found the opportunity to carry her up and press her down on the table. Scary. She was going to be eaten up. Gong Yimo was horrified to find that she had no strength to resist this position. The table was very high, and at this moment, her legs were hanging in the air. She had no strength at all. Gong Dai even used one hand to hold her hands behind her head. Those dark jade eyes were filled with lust at this moment. "What are you doing?" he panted and asked. His voice was low and hoarse, as if he was rubbing her ears. At the same time, he reached out to take the sachet and finally kissed her earlobe. "Are you looking for this?" He propped himself up, then brought the sachet to his nose and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes again, Gong Yimo felt that the pressure on his body had suddenly become heavier. The desire in his eyes was so terrifying that it almost devoured her. At this moment, he was looking down at her from above. His dangerous aura made Gong Yimo want to hold her breath, but he insisted on sending the sachet towards her nose. "Royal sister, don't you have any desire for me?" Gong Dai's voice was fervent and hoarse. "Why am I so thirsty for you?" When Gong Yimo heard his passionate words, she was caught off guard and took a deep breath. The rich fragrance entered her nose and turned into a wave of heat in an instant. The heat wave traveled along his respiratory tract to his lungs and burned his lower abdomen. Then, when she opened her eyes again, her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She, who had always been pure, actually felt a trace of unbearable heat. What was wrong with her? Gong Dai was pleasantly surprised by her change. He couldn't wait to lower his head and continue kissing her. At the same time, he restrained himself and gave her the most gentle experience. He wanted her to like this feeling, to like him. Why did he have to restrain himself? Perhaps he had really grown up. After all, it wasn't 3 years ago. At that time, he was afraid that she would leave, so he wanted to use this method to keep her. But now, he was getting stronger day by day. He also understood that if he truly loved someone, he could force them, but he couldn't force them on such matters. He was willing to wait for the day when she was willing, or even the day of their wedding. So during this period of time, all the teasing was just to quench his thirst. Royal sister, she could rest assured. He wouldn't be like before. Because now, his mentality and ability had become stronger once again. It was just that she was too sweet. If he wasn't careful, his soul would be hooked. After the passionate kiss, he straightened up and saw that Gong Yimo's face was slightly red. Her eyes were watery as she stared at him blankly. She seemed to be wondering, why did he stop? This look almost made him lose all his rationality. So, he lowered his head again. This time, Gong Yimo was very docile. Not only did she not resist him, she even made Gong Dai feel that she was cooperating with him. "Royal sister, don't tempt me anymore." He kissed her red lips until they were swollen before he left regretfully and said this. Gong Yimo was shocked. She realized what she had just done and quickly pushed him away to sit up. At this moment, Gong Dai also took a step back at the right time. He was panting slightly. Just now, his rationality and physiology had been in an intense battle. On one hand, he wanted to satisfy his desire to eat her up. On the other hand, he wanted to wait until she was willing and the day when success would follow naturally. He didn't want her to hate him because of her unwillingness. He wanted everlasting love. Gong Yimo was afraid of her appearance just now. For a moment, she even hoped that Gong Dai would be more proactive. It was too scary. This was definitely not her. Could it be that she hadn't tasted a man for too long? Was she feeling empty? Both of them were trying to calm their hearts. So at this moment, both of them didn't speak. The air was still very hot, as if there was a string that was stretched taut. The slightest teasing would cause it to break. At this time, they couldn't withstand the slightest provocation. At this moment, there was a commotion in the distance. The door to the princess's residence was forced open. Someone barged in and soon arrived at her courtyard. Gong Yimo. Come out quickly. What happened just now? Upon hearing this voice, Gong Dai's eyes suddenly turned cold. When Gong Yimo heard that it was Shun Shiyi, she breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly prepared to go out. It must have been a servant who went out to inform him. After all, Shun Shiyi's duty was to protect the imperial city. But she was held down by Gong Dai. Royal sister, you rest. I'll go. Gong Yimo looked at him. This wasn't good. No matter what, Shun Shiyi was worried about her and came over in the middle of the night. How could she not see him? But Gong Dai's expression softened. He lowered his head and licked her red and swollen lips. Do you want everyone to know what we just did? Ien. The word Ien made Gong Yimo's face burn. She hurriedly pushed Gong Dai away. Go, 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 I want to rest. Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, Gong Ju picked her up and carried her to the bed. Gong Yimo's heart jumped again. Moreover, Gong Dai also couldn't resist the temptation. He hugged her and kissed her again and again. It was rare for her to be so docile tonight. It must be the effect of the sachet. Gong Dai was prepared to wear this kind of sachet in the future. Gong Yimo saw that he still wanted to continue. She lightly bit her lower lip and pushed him. Shun Shiyi is still waiting. You, don't go too far. Unfortunately, her voice of resistance was like a kitten's. It was soft and tickling his heart unbearably. Gong Dai sighed. In the end, he kissed her forehead before going out. Once he left, Gong Yimo let out a long sigh of relief. She patted her burning face and spurned herself again in her heart. At this time, her rationality gradually returned. When she thought of what just happened, she wanted to go crazy. She clearly said that she would reject him. What exactly was she doing? Chapter 273. When Shun Shiyi saw Gong Dai come out of Gong Yimo's room, he was shocked. When the imperial guards he brought with him saw Gong Dai, they quickly knelt down, not daring to speak. Why are you here? Shun Shiyi frowned in dissatisfaction and glared at him. Where's Gong Yimo? Gong Dai smiled. Royal sister is resting. When Shun Shiyi heard this, he looked at him coldly. Realizing something, he waved his hand and dismissed everyone. When everyone left, he raised his eyebrows and asked in a low voice. She agreed to it. But he felt that it was impossible. How could Gong Yimo agree to such a thing? Gong Dai glanced at him indifferently. It's only a matter of time. Shun Shiyi was angry. Then everyone will have a chance. Why are you blocking the way? I want to see her. Ever since Gong Yimo came back from castration, he hadn't had a good talk with her. Although he didn't want to admit it, he missed her very much. Gong Dai sneered. You have a chance. He laughed at him for overestimating himself. Royal sister only treats you as an ordinary friend, so she's good to you. If you think that your relationship can go further because of this, then I can only say that you're delusional. When Shun Shiyi heard this, his hands clenched into fists. He glared at him. What right do you have to say that? How do you know that she doesn't like me? Are you her? Because if I don't want her to see you, she won't see you. Gong Dai's voice was cold. His tone was slow, but it was extremely hurtful. Because when she came back, the first person she saw was me, and not you. Shun Shiyi's face paled. He straightened his neck and retorted, That's because I left the capital before. Gong Dai laughed softly. That laughter was so mocking that it made Shun Shiyi's face turn white and red. His body was so tense that it trembled slightly. He was almost powerless to resist. He thought of Gong Yimo dancing for him. He thought of Gong Yimo killing people for him. She even gave him the gold medal bestowed by the emperor. Was all this just because he was a friend? He didn't believe that. Gong Yimo's feelings for him shouldn't be limited to this. He shouldn't have. Therefore, he mustered up his courage and shouted, She can drink with me. Seeing that I was unhappy, he would make me happy and even save my life regardless of the consequences. She, royal sister, is willing to die for me. Gong Dai looked at him coldly and interrupted him mercilessly. Do you dare say that? As if all his strength had been sucked out, Shun Shiyi felt cold just standing there. You can't do it. You're her little brother, and there's only me, only I can give her happiness openly. His words provoked Gong Dai, but Gong Dai only narrowed his eyes and cruelly told him the truth. Perhaps, but you won't have the chance. Yes, in Dai Yu State, he was the Prince of Qi whose words carried enormous weight. Even if Shun Shiyi inherited the throne in the end, how could he be a match for Gong Dai? For the first time, Shun Shiyi felt embarrassed and took 2 steps back. He didn't want to face him and wanted to run away. Wait. Gong Dai stopped him. In the night wind, Shun Shiyi's back paused, but he didn't look back. What else do you want? Gong Dai curled his lips slightly. I want you to hand over the gold medal that royal sister gave you. That doesn't belong to you. Shun Shiyi subconsciously covered his chest. No. This was the proof that Gong Yimo treated him well back then. It was the proof that they knew each other. This gold medal was the entirety of their relationship. However, Gong Dai approached him step by step. His steps were calm and his voice was like a ghost, echoing in his ears. Give it up. It's not yours. It's useless to force it. Being oppressed by Gong Dai and even wanting to take away his gold medal, Shun Shiyi felt humiliated and angry. However, he wasn't a match for Gong Dai. Thinking of this, his bright eyes dimmed. He didn't want Gong Dai to have an easy time, so he sneered. Aren't you also forcing it? He said coldly. What kind of person is Gong Yimo? She won't accept you. Aren't you going too far? At the end, he couldn't control his anger. Gong Dai had already walked behind him. The 2 of them were equally tall, but they seemed to be separated by the Milky Way. He lowered his voice. I'm forcing it because I can feel that I'm in her heart. Do you have the confidence? His tone was mocking, making Shun Shiyi feel like he was burning with anger. However, Gong Dai didn't seem to back down. His attitude was clear and domineering. Gong Yimo was his. Everything about her was his. Not only did he want to cut off these people's delusions, he also wanted to cut off their thoughts. If Shun Shiyi didn't hand it over, he didn't mind snatching it away. Shun Shiyi's back was facing him. He seemed to be thinking, but his shoulders kept trembling. He seemed to be enduring to the extreme. However, he wanted to resist, but he was afraid that once the matter was exposed, the one who would be hurt would be Gong Yimo. Gong Dai was right about one thing. Gong Yimo to him, perhaps she was just a friend. That was why she didn't come out, even if she couldn't sleep now. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt sad. It was really hurtful to be forced to see through this. His hand once again pressed against his chest. So, he was the only one who had been forcing himself all along. Ha ha ha, he, Shun Shiyi, didn't care. At this time, he took out the token. The bright color was very conspicuous under the moonlight. It was obviously often played with. Shun Shiyi had forgotten how many days and nights he missed Gong Yimo, but didn't know where to find her. He would hold this token and play with it. How many times, because of this token, he felt that he was different from others in Gong Yimo's heart. But, since she didn't care, what else was there for him to think about? So he turned around angrily and reached out to Gong Dai as if he had made up his mind. Isn't it just a token? His lips lost their color in an instant. His whole body trembled, but he was still trying to be brave. I don't care. Gong Ju reached out to grab the token, only to find that Gong Ju's grip was tight. But how could his strength be compared to Gong Ju's? No matter how hard he tried, Gong Ju's grip on the token was slowly being pulled away. The moment his hand was completely empty, Shun Shiyi felt that his heart was empty. He looked at the token and couldn't recover for a long time. Those things in the past, were they really in the past? Did she not exist? Was he daydreaming? His face darkened and he suddenly laughed, glaring fiercely at Gong Dai. Gong Dai, don't be complacent. Whether or not she will choose you is another matter. You. He coldly snorted, you won't be complacent forever. Because he had cut off a crooked peach blossom, Gong Dai was in a very good mood. You don't have to worry about it. Royal sister was mine when she was 7 years old. Shun Shi was hit again and again. He couldn't stand it anymore and turned to leave. As soon as he left the courtyard, he couldn't help but shout a few times. An imperial guard came forward and was kicked away by him. He was obviously very irritated and left with a murderous aura. But whether he was angry or shouting, he was still hurt. Unfortunately, Gong Dai didn't sympathize with him. He was an unscrupulous person. If someone didn't know what was good for them and wanted to steal his woman, he didn't mind being more ruthless. Chapter 274. The next day, Gong Yimo woke up with a pair of panda eyes. She still had a tough battle to fight today, but before she entered the palace, she wanted to see Hua Ju Wuyo. Seeing that Hua Ju Wuyo was about to go to Qi Manor, Gong Yimo was a little reluctant. She purposely waited until Gong Dai's morning court assembly before sneaking off to Qi Manor. Compared to the other princesses' grand procession, Gong Yimo's departure was rather low-key. Her martial prowess was high, so the Princess Manor's housekeeper naturally turned a blind eye and let her do as she pleased. Hence, she wore a scarf and headed to Qi Manor. However, before she could approach the entrance, she was stopped by 2 guards. "What are you doing here?" Gong Yimo lifted the veil of her scarf and smiled at them. "Do I need to announce my entry?" When the 2 guards saw that it was Gong Yimo, they hurriedly bowed. This subordinate did not know that the princess had arrived. "This subordinate deserves to die." They then said, "His Highness has instructed that no matter when, as long as you are here, you can directly enter without needing to seek permission from anyone. This subordinate will now bring you to Lord Bai." Gong Yimo nodded. Indeed, she needed Bai Sheng to lead the way. When Bai Sheng heard that Gong Yimo had arrived, he was first stunned before he became ecstatic. He hurriedly came out to welcome her. Gong Yimo did not beat around the bush and directly stated the purpose of her visit. Without another word, Bai Sheng brought her to Qi Manor's most mysterious dungeon, which was also Qi Manor's forbidden area. On the way, as Gong Yimo looked around, Bai Sheng told her about the things that had happened in the past few years. Qi Manor had changed a lot and many places had been designed with ingenuity. It was even more comfortable to live in than her Princess Manor. However, there was a sentry every 5 steps and a guard every 10 steps. It made one feel that the atmosphere in the manor was very oppressive. Those solemn imperial guards gave off a somber feeling for no reason. Furthermore, throughout the entire manor, she did not see a single woman. Gong Dai, he was really different from her previous life. Soon, they arrived at the dungeon. This dungeon had only been built a few years ago and was set up under the fake mountain. Many people who were inconvenient to be locked up in Zhao prison would be moved here. It was very close to where Gong Dai lived. After going down, Gong Yimo felt a chill in the air. She had a hunch that many people had died here. Hua Ju Wuyo was considered a very important person, so she was locked up in the innermost part of the dungeon. When Gong Yimo arrived, she was resting with her eyes closed and her legs crossed. It was as if this was not a dungeon, but an altar. As expected of Lu Yi's goddess. Gong Yimo thought of an idea and smiled wickedly. Hua Ju Wuyo heard the sound and opened his eyes. The moment he saw Gong Yimo, his eyes flashed with hostility. "It's you." She pursed her lips slightly. She was a little annoyed that she met Gong Yimo under such circumstances. She thought that she was much more noble than Gong Yimo. She was Lu Yi's only goddess, while Gong Yimo was just a pitiful princess who had been beaten to a commoner. Therefore, the moment they met should have been when Gong Yimo had failed in her restoration and was carrying an ominous name like a stray dog. At that time, Hua Ju Wuyo would have helped her like a god, showing the difference between the two of them. Yes, although Hua Ju Wuyo hated Gong Yimo, she also recognized Gong Yimo's talent and wanted to take her for her own use. Not now, when she was in the dungeon and at the mercy of others. "What are you doing here?" Hua Ju Wuyo harumphed. She was arrogant. Even if she was now a prisoner, she did not have to worry because her cousin was now in Daiyu state. She was not afraid of Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo walked in and smiled. "I heard that you are very knowledgeable about the mysteries of heaven and earth." Then, Did you predict that you would fall into my hands? Hua Ju Wuyo pursed her lips. Her tricks were actually just a little knowledge of the weather and feng shui. It was not much at all. However, because her family had a high status in Lu Yi and she knew how to run a business, she was regarded as a legend by the commoners. Seeing that Hua Ju Wuyo did not answer, Gong Yimo was amused. She smiled, revealing her white teeth. Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to ask, why did you attack me that day? Hua Ju Wuyo harumphed and ignored her. Gong Yimo touched her chin and asked with a smile, do you think I'm a threat and want to get rid of me? However, when she thought about how Kang Xiu had been stalling for time that day and did not kill her from the start, she said, or, do you want me to be unable to return to my position and be labeled as an inauspicious person? Then, you will attack me and make me work for you. She guessed the main point immediately. This made Hua Ju Wuyo hate this woman even more. She stood up suddenly. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? She opened her eyes and looked at Gong Yimo. She realized that the other party was really beautiful. At this point, she couldn't help but feel jealous. No wonder. Last night, Gong Ju went to look for her and was willing to buy her snacks. He even stood by her side and patiently taught the boss how to roast them. She liked it even more. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes slightly. She sensed that Hua Ju Wuyo was suddenly angry and emotionally unstable. She laughed mischievously and looked very harmless. If you are, then let me continue to guess. The reason why your Hua Ju family has such a high status in Lu Yi is because your family is the stable hand of the government. Almost half of Lu Yi's famous horses come from your family, right? Then, you came to look for me because of my relationship with the second prince of Yuheng? You want me to work for you and help you build a bridge so that Lu Yi and Yuheng can trade through the land route? I think this should be your cousin Long Cheng Wuji's idea. Once your family succeeds, you will be able to gain a lot of benefits. But this matter should be done by your biological brother. You sneaked out, right? Hua Ju Wuyo's pupils shrank and she suddenly felt a little scared. She had never thought that a woman like Gong Yimo would have such a powerful vision and analytical ability. She had only eavesdropped on her brother and cousin's plan. That was why she sneaked out and planned it step by step. She wanted to make a contribution and share her cousin's burden. But Gong Yimo was an outsider. Without eavesdropping, she could actually guess their secret plan so clearly. It was really frightening. No matter how powerful Hua Ju Wuyo was, in the end, she was just a goddess with limited vision. She was good at scheming and managing the harem, but when it came to the world, how could she compare to a little fox like Gong Yimo? It was not difficult to guess all these. The difficult part was to be open-minded. Seeing that Hua Ju Wuyo was shocked and angry, Gong Yimo lowered her voice and asked at the right time. But from what I know, your family doesn't have many horses, right? 2 years ago, many of them died because of the plague. Now, I'm afraid they are not as good as Baiji's family. With such a big appetite, can you eat them all? Chapter 275. Her tone was slightly mocking. Such insulting words deeply agitated Hua Ju Wuyo. What is Baiji's family? That plague has already passed for 2 years. We have already recovered our strength. She looked at Gong Yimo and lifted her chin slightly. Suddenly, she felt that Gong Yimo was just SOSO. She didn't really know everything. But at this moment, she still didn't know that she had unintentionally revealed some terrible news. After all, she had limited knowledge and caused Dragon City Wuji to suffer heavy losses. After achieving her goal, Gong Yimo became very easy to talk to. She looked at Hua Ju Wuyo and revealed her white teeth. Oh right. General Lu Yi is your biological brother, right? She chuckled and touched her shoulder. Back then, he shot me with an arrow and I almost died in the West Province. Now that you are in my hands, do you think I should take revenge on him through you? How dare you? Hua Ju Wuyo sneered, her expression fearless. I am the future Princess Lu Yi. If you dare to touch me, my cousin won't let you off. The Hua Ju family won't let you off either. What she said was the truth. Gong Yimo really didn't dare to do anything to her now, so she touched her nose and spread out her hands. I was just saying. Look at how agitated you are. All right. If you don't want to see me, I'll leave, okay? With that, she really walked away. Hua Ju Wuyo wanted to stop her, but she didn't forget that she was now a prisoner. She could only watch angrily as Gong Yimo walked away. Once Gong Yimo left, she was a little discouraged. She stomped her foot angrily and bit her lower lip. Back then, she only knew about Gong Yimo because her brother, Hua Ju Jinyang, had told her. At that time, he had returned from Daiyu State and hurriedly went to look for his cousin. She had insisted on listening in. Only then did she know that Gong Yimo existed in this world. At that time, her brother had held Gong Yimo in high esteem. His expression was very serious, as if this woman would become her cousin's rival. At that time, she was very unconvinced. She had seen a lot of women. What talented woman, what heavenly woman, they were all exaggerated because of some small things, and in the end, they were just undeserved titles. Although she didn't want to admit it, her identity as a goddess was deliberately packaged by her family, and she had worked hard to achieve it. It was all for the sake of marrying her cousin. Therefore, even after listening to her brother's stories about Gong Yimo, she still felt that Gong Yimo was just a brute. Perhaps she was smarter than other women and knew how to run a business better, but that was all there was to it. Especially when she heard that a woman like her could think of building canals and digging canals, she felt that it was even more ridiculous. She thought that there must be someone behind Gong Yimo to package him up, but it was too exaggerated. But this time, she saw Gong Yimo with her own eyes. Although she didn't want to admit it, she realized that she couldn't see through Gong Yimo's thoughts at all. On the contrary, Gong Yimo could easily see through her thoughts. This made her very annoyed. Her thoughts couldn't help but be self-satisfied, and she once again thought of the incident last night. She saw Gong Dai, such a scary man, walk into a dessert shop with everyone kneeling down to welcome him. The boss and lady boss, who had been waiting there for a long time, were so scared that they were trembling. At that time, no one dared to speak, and Gong Dai asked the boss what to do in this extremely oppressive atmosphere. He said, "More sugar." The boss didn't dare to disobey and quickly did as he was told. He said, "Burn both sides a little." The boss wiped his sweat and didn't dare to refute. As for her, because she was afraid that she would run away, Gong Dai also brought her along when they got out of the car. Therefore, she was lucky enough to witness this scene. Looking at the little old man's attitude of making desserts, as if he was worshipping his ancestors, she didn't know why, but this contrast suddenly made her impression of Gong Dai better. She even felt like laughing at how a man like him still wanted to eat desserts in the middle of the night. Who knew that he wasn't eating for himself? When she thought about the whole story and the direction they were going, Hua Ju Wuyo suddenly felt very uncomfortable in her heart. Gong Dai's unique gentleness was it because of a woman? She didn't admit that she was jealous because she already had a cousin, but she still felt very uncomfortable in her heart. And when she first saw Gong Yimo today, she thought to herself, other than her face, she was just SOSO. She even felt that for Gong Yimo to have such achievements, Gong Dai must have put in a lot of effort. She was really skilled to be able to conquer a man like Gong Dai. Unknowingly, Gong Yimo gradually became the image of a scheming fox in her heart. The next day, Daiyu State Palace. Emperor Gong was very surprised. "Who did you say came?" "King Lu Yi." Why did he suddenly come to visit if he didn't stay in Lu Yi? When he heard that King Lu Yi came, Emperor Gong couldn't help but put aside the assassination attempt at the princess residence last night. After all, that was the boy pet he chose. If there was a problem, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. But now, Lu Yi's visit was even more urgent. So after a series of preparations, Emperor Gong personally hosted a banquet to entertain King Lu Yi. Emperor Gong was also a smart person. He faintly felt that King Lu Yi came here for the cooperation of the bank. After all, Lu Yi's grain production was low. If they could really do business for them, it would be disrespectful. So Emperor Gong didn't invite many people to be present to show respect. In the magnificent hall, there was singing and dancing. Emperor Gong noticed that King Lu Yi didn't bring many people with him this time. It gave people the feeling that he came in a hurry. This made him even more suspicious. Did something happen to Lu Yi? King Luyi wore a silver mask on his face. It was said that his face was disfigured, so even in Luyi, there were very few people who had seen his true face. So the more he thought about it, the more he couldn't figure out how Gong Yimo knew him. But this wasn't important. Winner takes all. Now he just wanted to solve the problem. At this time, he looked around and asked with a smile in a deep voice, "May I ask Daiyu State's monarch?" When this king entered the capital, he heard countless rumors. They said that a princess of Daiyu State had been restored, and the heavens had blessed her. This king was very curious and wanted to meet her. Emperor Gong hesitated. It was obvious that King Luyi came here to discuss national affairs. How could there be a woman present? But then he thought about it. Didn't he already decide to treat Moa as his son? He really had a devil in his heart. But why was King Luyi so interested in Moa? But he didn't think about this first. He directly waved his hand. Summon the eldest princess to the banquet. Summon the eldest princess to the banquet. The sound of the singing spread far and wide. At this time, Emperor Gong also directly waved away the singing and dancing. He and King Luyi talked about business. Emperor Gong toasted a cup of wine to Longcheng Wuji. His eyes were bright and spirited as he laughed loudly. It's the end of the year. King Luyi suddenly came to visit. This made me puzzled. King Luyi, please enlighten me. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.